Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the school committee meeting of November 4th, 2020. I'd like to remind everyone this meeting is being recorded. It's also being broadcast live. It's being recorded because we may have a need at another time to see the record. All votes this evening will be roll call because Mr. Small is remote. There's a very good chance possibly we may end up remote depending on what the governor's changes have come. We could all end up remote, so be prepared for that. But right at this present time, we're going to be running live. I'd ask you to please entertain a moment of silence and join me. Thank you. Would you also please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please, as Mr. Small alluded to earlier, speak up if you can this evening. I'm just getting used to this hearing aid, Fred. So, thank you all. I'm going to take a couple of things out of order just for the sake of getting people in and out. The first thing under new business is notice of state investigation. Lisa Green is here, and is Mr. Stanbrook calling in? Shell?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Jeff?
Sure. So just to let the committee know, I shared this with the committee. I shared this with Lisa Green, the chairs of both boards of selectmen, and Mr. Stanbrook. On Friday afternoon, the chair, the co-chair, or vice chair, and myself got a letter or an email from David Forth. I'm informing the superintendent, chair, and vice chair of an ongoing state investigation into the school district. The state is also actively investigating both towns of Whitman and Hanson. I called our school counsel, Andy Waugh, on Monday to put him on notice of this investigation, and he has not received anything as of yet from the state. I haven't been notified from the state. I asked Lisa and I asked John if they've been notified by the state, and they haven't. I followed up with an email to David. The district has not been notified by the state of any investigation. If you have information regarding the agency or contact person who is investigating the district, Whitman and Hanson, I would ask you to share this information for me. I have not received anything. Therefore, I emailed the committee that I have no further information, but I wanted to put the committee on notice, Lisa and John on notice of some sort of investigation that's going on.
Lisa?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I did receive the email from Superintendent Simonak. I can report that the town of Whitman, has not received any notification from any state agency regarding an investigation. I did speak with our town council, and I put them on notice as well. They have not received any notice from any agency. I'm just curious to see what agency that you were referring to is investigating the schools and the towns.
Yep.
When this came about, because you noted that it was an ongoing and an active investigation. However, none of us have received any notice of any type of investigation, which is highly unusual of a state.
Mr. Stanbrook?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Same thing in Hanson. I haven't received anything. I haven't been notified by anyone, state, by any kind whatsoever. So I'm a little bit baffled about the whole thing, and I hope that you have some sort of explanation. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? David?
Yeah, sure. So first, I want to thank the committee for adding this as an agenda item. I think it's something we need to talk about and address so I can inform everyone. On Friday, I emailed the chair, the vice chair, and the superintendent, as Jeff has said, to inform them that there is an ongoing state investigation. In August, I informed the committee that I had reached out to the Inspector General and the AG's office to look into the process of how that would go if the committee need to look into requesting an investigation or having the state get involved. After I had that phone call, about a couple weeks later, I received a follow-up conversation from the Inspector General. They requested documentation from me. I provided them with the documentation that they requested, and then A couple weeks after that, they called me to just inform me that the investigation was referred to the Department of Revenue, and the Department of Revenue is investigating the towns of Whitman and Hanson and the school district. And that is honestly all the information I have. This investigation, I didn't ask for it, request it, I was informed of it. They asked me for documentation, so I provided it, and I wanted to make sure that the superintendent, the chair, and the vice chair were on the same page and aware of this, so they weren't just getting a random call. And then I wanted to make sure to wait till this meeting so everybody here is together. Same thing, very consistent, same message. So to my understanding, as I was informed by the Inspector General's office, the Department of Revenue is investigating. Now, I'm not the state. I don't know if that's changed, but the Inspector General did tell me that, so I wanted to make sure leadership was informed, and that is what I have regarding that.
Questions, anyone?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Small?
Okay, so approximately what date, David? You said a few weeks after your initial call in August?
Yeah, and then they followed up asking for documentation, and then a couple weeks after that, they called me to inform me that they were going to follow up with that, and the Department of Revenue was going to be investigating it. They have not since called me and said, oh, well, we're looking into, said individual or said situation. All I know is the Department of Revenue was looking into the matter, and that is all I can confirm. I don't know if it's the Division of Local Services as a subgroup or the Department of Revenue as a
No,
whole.
understandable, but what was the timeline? In other words, how long ago was it that they informed you that we're under investigation, so to speak?
I'm not sure on the exact timeline. I can look back at my call logs and try to see when I received that, but I don't want to give the committee a date right now and then have that be, the wrong month or the wrong week. It hasn't been a significant amount of time.
Approximate. Was it a week ago, 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
I'm not going to give an estimate. I can get you the exact date and then I can send that over, or we can talk about that next meeting, but I'm not sure. So that is all I just want to inform Chair, Vice Chair, and the Superintendent.
What documentation was requested?
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to discuss that.
Well, this guy's a good one.
Mike?
Why wouldn't you?
Oh, go ahead, Fred. Go ahead, Fred.
State requested it from me. I wasn't going to say no to the state. I think that would be a whole nother matter.
Oh, no, and we wouldn't want you to not give them documentation. I'm just curious as to what they asked for, and perhaps I would think it might be a good idea for our attorney to get a copy.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sure some of the documentation I provided had to do with the documents I spoke about in September that the committee didn't want to look at. And going from there, I don't know what other documents, I can get them together. And if the state says it's okay to give the committee or to send over to legal counsel, I have no problem with that. I'm not withholding anything. I don't know. And I don't want to do something that could get me in trouble with the state.
So I take it, so you were the complainant then, correct?
No, state informed me that they were investigating, they were looking into documentation. I don't have the power to,
The complaint, don't they act on a complaint?
I don't know.
I don't know, I'm not an attorney.
I don't think I individually have the power to complain one time and then that would set an investigation into 2 towns in the school district. If I have that power, I'm not aware of it. But the state, they made that choice. How they went about that choice, I do not know. You would have to ask them. But other than that, I mean, I told the committee back in August that I did this, or I had done this, and they have followed up, and now I'm following up with everyone else.
Do you have contact information you can provide to our attorney?
I don't have like an investigator's name, but I can give the IG and the Department of Revenue numbers. I don't have a particular investigator. I'm not sure how everything goes on with COVID. I know they had told me they have a COVID hotline now and a COVID email, and they had to redo everything because of the pandemic. I'm not sure how that translates to this.
Right, but I'm assuming that you spoke to someone, you would have their name and their phone number that you could provide to Andy. That's, you know what I'm saying?
Sure, I will look into it, yeah. I have no problem. I'm not trying to withhold anything.
All right, Fred, I have Mike's got his hand up. Mike?
Yeah, I think you answered the first part of my question, but second part, David, how long have you been on the school committee now?
At this point, almost 5 months.
This is the, what, second or third time we've house full of lawyers and this and that. What's going on, man?
Excuse me.
Whoa, excuse me, but first off, you can't address me directly as a committee member and accuse me of causing some sort of chaos. I mean, this wasn't.
No, what I'm asking you is,
Why-
why are you reaching out? What was the reasoning for calling, what did you say, the state? You called the state to ask a question or something?
I said this in August, Mr. Jones. This was brought up. This isn't the first time you're hearing of it. This was spoken about.
And then you wait, what? How many months to tell Jeff that there's an investigation? Like, they just reached out to you on
They
Thursday?
didn't tell me. You know,
So they called you on Thursday?
they didn't call me on Thursday.
They called you on Friday to tell you?
And also, you have to keep in mind too, that if the state tells me to do something and the district tells me to do another thing, what should I do there, Mr. Jones?
I have no idea.
Well,
The state's
exactly.
never called me. I've been on for however many years. I never had a phone call from the state. I'm just curious. So why did you call on Friday? You had this information. I don't know, did they tell you, hey, to let us know on that Friday?
Yeah,
guess I'm asking.
Okay. Please, guys, go through me to him.
Right.
So we're not doing this directly with each other. Address me and we'll, no problem with it. Were you done, Mike? I'm sorry.
No, but,
Go continue.
no, I'm good, thanks.
Lisa?
Okay.
And then Jeff, and then Dan?
Mr. Forth?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am an attorney, all right, licensed attorney with the state of Massachusetts, although I'm not a practicing attorney. I do have an idea of how this all works, okay? I have dealt with the Inspector General's office, I have dealt with the AG's office, I have dealt with Division of Local Services and the Department of Revenue. Something is not making sense here. If you made a phone call to a state agency and you made a complaint, they're going to investigate it. But you sit here today and say you do not know what type of documents they asked you for, or you're not revealing the type of documents they asked you for.
Am I being cross-examined right now?
I am speaking on behalf of the town of Whitman, who you say is being investigated. We have not heard a word from any state agency or received any kind of a notification. I'm asking you simple questions. This is not an accusation. We're asking you simple questions that you're not answering.
I
Okay?
answered the question.
If somebody calls me and says, I want your tax return for 1982, I want a copy of your marriage certificate, I want a copy of your birth certificate, these are documents. For you to sit here and say you don't know what type of documents they requested,
Ms. Green, they did not request specific documents from me. They asked me to turn over any documentation I had related to what they were looking into.
Okay, but-
There was a lot of documentation. Like I said, I'm not withholding it. There was 30, 40 pages. I can't just sit here and say, this is what I gave, this is what I gave. I have no problem giving that over to the town. I have no issue. I already said that. I'm not withholding anything. I just don't want to sit here and say, oh, I gave this document, and then we go look into it, and I accidentally gave a different document instead of the other one. I don't know. I can give it over. I can hand you guys the documentation needed. The only reason I'm saying I don't know specifically what I gave at the moment is because there's 40 or 50 pages. I can name a couple things, sure. But they didn't sit here and say, we want this from you, we want that, we want this. They told me to transfer anything I had or anything that I might find useful, and then that was that. They didn't tell me, oh, we really appreciate you giving us this or that. So I don't have the answers. I didn't know if they contacted the towns of Whitman or Hanson or not. From the school district point of view, as a school committee, I have not heard anything, and clearly the superintendent hasn't either. From the state notifying the school district, but yeah, I don't know really what else more to say than that. Again, if I can reach out to the state, I'm sure you guys will do the same. If there's any documentation that I can provide, or if I can just give you guys all of it, I will send it right over. That is no problem with me, none at all. And again, if I can go back and try to get the call logs, look at the voicemails, and also get any numbers and try to find a name, to give to you guys to reach out. But they never told me specifically, this is who's looking into it on the Department of Revenue's end, because the IG's office is who I spoke to. They told me the Department of Revenue was investigating. They didn't tell me who was investigating from the Department of Revenue. They notified me of a name for the IG's office, but they told me they weren't looking into it anymore, and it went over to the Department of Revenue. So I don't know. So I'm not trying to make this difficult on anyone. I just wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page, so it wasn't blindsided by anyone, and that was really that. So if I can be of assistance and help out, I will.
Well, wouldn't it make sense that you would let us know what agencies? You just said there's an active investigation and an ongoing investigation, yet you failed to
I just-
name what agencies
I
it
named the
was.
Department of Revenue.
Well, you said that just now, but in your email earlier, you just kind of gave a blank saying, it's like us saying, well, you're being investigated. By what? By whom? For what reason? I mean,
Well,
were
I
they
sent an
financial
email to
documents you turned
leadership
over?
on Friday, and then Wednesday, I knew it was going to be our meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I knew we would be discussing it here, so I knew this was going to require deliberation and didn't want to overstep or go into any gray area with open meeting law, so I informed everyone here. And I gave the information. I'm not withholding anything, nor am I trying to make it difficult. So I understand your concern, and I understand why you may be on the defensive. They never informed me that any specific individual is being investigated. They are just looking into it. And I can't say that's my own doing, because I wasn't told that that was my own doing. They told me they were already looking into it, and that they're going to continue looking into it. So apparently there was already investigation going on before I called, but I don't know. I can't confirm that. That's how it sounded like to me on the phone, but I don't want to misquote or misrepresent what the state's doing, because I'm not the state looking into that. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew what I knew, and we're on the same page. I'm not trying to be cross-examined or interrogated again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I was just going to
Jeff,
ask,
and then Dan?
usually when I call the state, I get a name, and if there's a number,
me.
that's all I'm looking for, so I can contact the agency tomorrow,
Right, can I
because you should have a name. Somebody spoke to you and
Can I
introduced
just
himself
repeat
to
what I
you.
said? I spoke with the IG's office. They gave me a name. They told me.
So can you share that name?
I don't know the name. I don't remember her name. I can get you name. She's not looking into it anymore. The Department of Revenue is. She's from the IG's office. She called me to let me know that the Department of Revenue is investigating. I asked for a name. They said they don't know, and to call the Department of Revenue if I wanted to look into it further. And I don't have that number. I can get you that number.
So just my, and, no disrespect, but just my simple issue right now is that you said to Ms. Green that you didn't want to share too much information, that you were going to come prepared to this meeting tonight to open and to share with the committee what you knew, and now you don't have a name for me right now that I can follow up with first thing in the morning from the IG's office, not the Department of Revenue, just the person that left you her name, because you said you had that. So you were prepared for this meeting, because, David, this is my issue. I'm the chief executive officer of the district, and you let me know on Friday afternoon that there's a declarative statement that there's an ongoing investigation of our district, and I have no idea what that is. Is it budgetary? Is it academic? Did we do something wrong with MCAS? Did we do something wrong? So when I asked you on Monday to follow up, I got nothing from that. So I don't even know what agency is looking at us right now. I work with the Department of Education, I work with Department of Revenue, we work with multiple offices, so for you not to now not give me a name that I can look into tomorrow is challenging for me,
I never
because we
said I
have
can give you
multiple
a name.
things going on, so.
So again, as I will reiterate again, I have already stated the Department of Revenue is the one who's investigating. So I'm going to make the assumption it's probably budget related because it's revenue. The lady who called me from the IG's office, no, I don't remember her name. We spoke briefly. She told me to follow up with the Department of Revenue if I wanted to know anything more. I have not followed up with the Department of Revenue. So she gave me a name. I can go try to retrieve her name. I'm sure it's not a major issue. And then number that she gave me with the Department of Revenue was their basic number, the one that you could just Google and get. There wasn't, so-and-so from the investigation units looking into this called them. If I had that, I'd give it to you. I don't. And then the IG's office number was just their regular number that you can pull up. There isn't a special number that I have, any unique info. Like I said, I will give it to you if I had it.
And can I just add on that? And just to add on to that piece, and I don't know, since you submitted documents to them, we did receive a records request from you on Monday for documents from 1991 to 94 and from 2006 to 2008. Are those documents that you're going to submit to this person?
No, they're not. They're unrelated to the state.
So just the committee know we have another records request on top of this. So this is another issue. Those
Public
documents
records
are
requests
something
are new.
different than what you're saying DOR is investigating.
I've got Dan patiently waiting, and then Chris, and then Mike, and Hillary. Okay.
I'm good.
Dan, I got a whole.
No, just get in the line.
Go ahead, Dan.
Mr. Chair, I just want to know, is he acting as a citizen, or is he acting on behalf of the school committee here? When he calls the attorney, in the Attorney General's office to start this all off?
David, can you answer that?
I can answer that, actually, because I did ask that question to the IG, and they told me that I would be acting as an individual, and if I was reporting anything, and I'm not saying I was, but they said, for example, if I was reporting criminal activity or anything like that, that wouldn't go against me violating school committee, open meeting law, or anything like that, that I would be, again, as Mr. Small said, reporting a complaint. But I didn't report a complaint. I asked what the process would be. And they asked me what I would be looking into or what I'm asking about, and that's when I brought up Whitman Hanson. And again, that was our first conversation, and again, a couple weeks later, they follow up with me asking for documentation. So, yeah, that's what I have. I wasn't acting as a committee member or doing my own thing. The state reached out to me, and if the state asked for documentation, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a
So,
Go ahead, Dan.
Part two of that one would be, if they're calling him back, he must be the one that opened the complaint to start the investigation. They just don't come out to somebody and say, hey, by the way, we need documentation, unless you call to put in a complaint. And that's what we're trying to find here, because it's starting to cost the school district money. And we're starting to go down rabbit holes, which the school committee really shouldn't be going through. You know, so we just want to know, is he going to continue to be a citizen or a school committee member on this school committee here?
David?
Yeah, sure. So again, when the IG's office called me asking for documentation, and then they followed up again with another phone call saying that that the Department of Revenue was investigating and had been looking into it, is to my understanding that they were already investigating before even a phone call was made by me. So the first conversation we had, yeah, I brought up would I need to give anyone any documentation if that's the process we go through, and they said yes, if there was an investigation going on, which the IG said, to our knowledge, there wasn't, and we're not going to request any documentation. And that was that. And then they called, and they asked me for documentation. They said, send it over, and that was our phone call there. And then the next phone call I had was them informing me that the Department of Revenue was investigating and that they had been investigating, and that was that. They didn't tell me any more information, and yeah, they told me that in order to call and to investigate, they weren't sure whether I would call the main Department of Revenue number, or if it's something the DLS would be taking care of, or how that's going on with COVID. That was kind of the emphasis they were trying to put onto it. But yeah, that's really all I have.
Chair?
Fred, I got a list.
That's okay, put me in line, I appreciate it.
You're after Chris Scriven. Chris Howard,
Yep.
Mike Jones, Hillary, Chris,
So,
and then Fred. And we got to move on.
Yeah,
to-
I know. So Dan covered one piece, and I think we've had this conversation before, right? Where certainly everyone has the right to act as a private citizen, but as a school committee member, there's also obligations that we all have. So there's a balancing act between the two of those. So a question, I guess I'm still trying to wrap my head around is, through you, why does Mr. Forth, why is he notifying us of this investigation? What is the point of that exercise?
David, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
I wanted to make sure you guys were on the same page. I wanted to make sure leadership was on the same page, and that's really all I had to add.
Okay.
I didn't go around, as I know a lot of committee members complain about. I didn't go on social media posting about it, saying this or that. I wanted to make sure we had a meeting and we could talk about it and go about it, and that's it. I'm just trying to make sure the committee is on the same page and transparent, because this is something major, I agree.
So in the spirit of transparency and communication, I'd like to make a motion that Mr. Forth provide this committee any and all communications that he's had with any state agency pertaining to the Whitman Hanson Regional School District.
Second that motion.
I have a second. Michelle, did you get that? Any further discussion on the motion? David?
Could you repeat it, please?
Speak a little louder.
Fred, basically, to sum it up, you'll get the legal copy, but provide anything and everything that's been shared by Mr. Forth to any state agency pertaining to the Whitman Hanson Regional School District.
Thank you, Chris, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Now, I have a motion, the second, further discussion. David?
I just was saying, again, I have no problem turning that over. My only question is, if this is an active investigation and that's being used as evidence, how would that work? If the committee, if the state says it's okay and I can give that to the committee, no problem. I just don't want to put myself in the gray area. I have no problem delivering this to committee, as I've said several times now already. I just wonder if this is an active investigation still going on and they are using anything I've given them as evidence, then how's that process work? I guess is my question.
Chris, and then Jeff, and
Sorry,
we're on the
I guess
motion.
I'd just
Mike,
like
I
to-
know that
yeah.
you're waiting patiently.
I guess
We're on the motion, right?
Respond back to the motion. So, the motion is simply to provide it. Mr. Forth can take whatever actions he deems appropriate, whether he wishes to comply or not. So the motion stands on its own in terms of a request.
Okay.
In the spirit of transparency, I think we should have everything. If he chooses, he can.
Wait a second,
That's up to
Fred.
him.
Jeff, go ahead.
No, I'm good. That's
You good?
what I was following with Chris.
Fred? This is on the motion, guys. I'm going right back to Mike as soon as we...
This would go under, the same thing as discovery. We have a right to have the same documentation that anyone else would have. So I don't know where it would be anything that would be privileged. And unless they explicitly said that it was privileged information or privileged, documentation, I don't see why there'll be any issue, in sharing it.
Okay, Jeff?
I was just going to say, Mr. Howard, maybe you could amend that motion to add both the towns of Whitman and Hanson? Or,
I think if it is provided in a public meeting, they're going to certainly have access to it, as well as every citizen in the
Then we're
town of
fine.
Whitman and Hanson.
Any further discussion on the motion on the floor, and then I'm going to Mike Jones. Roll call vote. Dan?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Forth?
No.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Sniffen, yes. Bob Hayes, yes.
Yes.
Don Myers, I'm sorry. Don, you don't know who you are? Chris Revan?
Yes.
Okay, 9-1, motion.
Fred.
Mr. Small, I'm sorry. Fred, I'm looking right at you, too. Okay, the motion carries.
I'll take a pat.
To Mr. Jones, you're deferring to Hillary? Hillary, you're up next, then Chris, then Fred.
I mean, I guess if we have the motion, if it's been approved, but I guess my only question to Mr. Forth would be, in the midst of all of this, trying to open schools and educate children in a pandemic, how is this investigation helping us accomplish that as a school committee? That's my question.
Through me to you, Mr. Forth, would you like to
I
answer that?
think it's almost like I started the investigation. This wasn't my doing. I mean, they're investigating. I'm not sure if it will help. I think it will help the transparency and the integrity of the committee, in my opinion.
So my question is, how is
But-
providing documents to the state about whatever is happening, whether he began the investigation or not, how is wasting a half hour of our meeting in the midst of a pandemic trying to open schools and educate children beneficial to our task as a school committee?
David, would you like to answer that?
Well, I mean, when the state's investigating and they think that, or they believe that there's a financial issue happening within our district or within our towns, then I think making sure that everyone's abiding by the law and that we're being transparent and that the financial process and everything related to it is being followed, I think that is essential, because if we don't have the integrity and honesty and the truth to what's been going on, then I don't know how going forward we can actually have people. You can't have people who've been perpetuating the issue, if they have been perpetuating the issue, in charge going forward. So I don't know if it helps the pandemic at all.
I'm
but
talking
does it
about
help-
educating children. I'm talking about providing an education to our students in the Whitman Hanson Regional School District.
Well,
That's all I want to know.
Okay,
Budgetary-
then I can answer that right there.
How is this half hour beneficial for that?
Okay, please through me, though. David,
Yes.
you want to answer?
Yeah, I just was gonna say that in order for us to get through, I guess, our issues with funding schools and allowing us to properly assess our towns, that we need to go through the state, because clearly the way we've been doing it all these years, one, hasn't been correctly, hasn't been transparently, as some documents here, the DESI review speaks on that. And I want to make sure going forward that that's what we're doing, and I think the state does too. How does that help us right this moment? It doesn't, you're right, it doesn't help us right this moment, but in the long term, it does. It does, because our schools have a serious issue. We have a serious problem, and one that the state recognized and that they're looking into. And if the state looks into it and they think it's an issue that needs to be recognized, then I would agree with them. So I guess that's my answer to you.
Mr. Jones, and then Mr. Scriven, and then Mr. Small. I didn't forget you.
Well, just to,
But if I do, Fred, speak up.
what's the issue, David?
You know I will.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
Mr. Chairman, what is the issue that he's talking about?
Through me to Mr. Forth, would you like to answer that?
So apparently there's been some ongoing issues regarding the tax levy and the origins to Chapter 70 on how that's been played out here. Not just statutory, but minimum level contributions to each town, how that's been being assessed, and everything related to it. So to making sure that's done properly and accurately and transparently, I think that helps. But again, I'm not investigating, and I don't know, I'm just here. I'm just informing you guys, and I'm being questioned about it. And if I don't have any more answers for you guys.
So, Mr. Chairman, so he honestly believes that after calling the state just randomly called him and started asking him all these questions. I'm just curious. And then in August, he got another phone call or something, and then he decided to let us know on Friday. I just want to be clear for the minutes. Is that what happened?
No.
David, would you like to answer
So
that?
the minutes are accurate.
Yeah, no, I understand. I understand. All right, so I'm gonna repeat this again. So, like I said in August, I don't know if it was the August 6th or the August 25th meeting, but I had mentioned that I reached out to the IG's office and the AG's office, trying to understand that, how the process would work if we need to have an investigation, because that was something that was being discussed at the time. And they just told me that if there was an ongoing investigation right now, they'd be requesting documentation. I didn't ask for an investigation. I just said I'm looking into if I need to make, have the committee go about the process to reach out to the IG to have an investigation, have that looked into. How would we do that? And the IG's office said, usually we would request documentation, and then we do A, B, and C, but I'm not sure what their step-by-step process was, what they told me, but they told me they would request documentation if they were investigating anything, and that was that, and I hung up, and there was no further conversation for a couple weeks, and then I got a phone call. I'm not sure how long it wasn't a very long one. The IG's office said, can you give us whatever documentation you have related to Whitman Hanson? And I did. And then from there wasn't any follow-up. I didn't get a follow-up email after I sent that documentation or anything like that. I just got a call later on, not the same day, obviously, a couple weeks later. And the IG's office told me that the Department of Revenue not only is looking into it, but has been looking into it, and that they don't have an investigator's name. They think it might have been the Division of Local Services, but to call the Department of Revenue outright to look into that, and that was that.
Go ahead, Mike. George, you got a line?
So, second question to that would be after finding out about the more document requests and everything from Mr. Forth that are going to involve more lawyers and this and that. Jeff, what is the expense to just simply find the 1991 to whatever and the other, all these documents that he's now requesting that are going to include more lawyers and fees? What is just for whoever's got to find all this information? What expense are we talking?
So we will have to pull the records that are there. They're all hard copy paper records from 91 to 94. We'll have to Michelle, what's that word? Redact. Have to redact and go through different things. We also don't have we wouldn't have hard copies of what the state sent us from 91 and 94 because they fax things, and those aren't records that we wouldn't have to hold, so we'd have to look through those. It would be an expense, but it would be an expense that would be billed to Mr. Forth, and he would have to choose to pay for that expense. It's $25 an hour plus copy costs, according to the law, to the records request law.
Thank you.
Chris and George is being patient, and so's Fred. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to bring you back to my comments I made after the last election, when we convened as a school committee, I was really excited to add 2 new members, and after the first meeting, rather, you know, the energy, the knowledge, you know, I felt like we were turning a corner. It was my intention to do everything I could to help the committee restore the public trust and, you know, do all we could to work towards gaining more support from the public going forward. And I feel like, you know, it reminds me of something, you know, I used to hear a lot as a kid. It's not what you said, it's how you said it, right? My mother would say it to me all the time, keep me in line. Not what you said, it's how you said it. Well, you know, in this situation, I feel like any of us can ask questions, and we should. We should always be looking to, you know, keep things on the up and up. But it's how we do it. It's how we do it. And I think that's the problem. And I think we cannot effectively function as a committee if we continue to have one member take us off track. I will do anything I can to support an effort to uncover any wrongdoing, but I want to do it as a committee. And I think that's where we're missing we're taking our eye off the ball, and that's what's disturbing. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, Fred, and then George, and then we got to move on, guys. We're already into,
Yeah, and just to take 30 seconds, Mr. Scriven, I'd like to agree with your sentiments wholeheartedly. I know when Mr. Forth did come on the committee, I did reach out to him, make a phone call, congratulate him, and truly from the heart told him if he ever needed anything or needed assistance or didn't understand something, to feel free to call and I would be there for him. I agree that we all need to work together, and that's the only way that we can go forward is working together. I did have a few questions, just 2 additional questions to Mr. Forth through you, Mr. Chair.
go ahead.
Mr. Forth, are you represented by counsel? Do you have an attorney?
I'm not answering any more questions regarding this agenda item. We spent too long on this. I already said everything. It's redundant at this point.
Fred, he's not interested in answering. I don't know if you can hear him, so I'm not being,
I can hear him. I am going to, I did ask that question. I have one more question. Does he have a case number from the IG or the DOR?
I think he was clear that he didn't even know who the investigator was at this present time.
From the Department of Revenue, no. Again, like I said, I was given a name by the IG. I forget her name. I can give you guys her name right after. I mean, if you really want me to, I can look it up right now and try to get it during a meeting, but I'm sure it'd be easier to do it after. And then I can send that to the whole committee. That's no problem. As for the Department of Revenue, I don't have a specific name because the IG themselves didn't have a name for me.
Okay,
and
Fred?
that's what I have.
Appreciate it. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. George, thank you for being patient.
That's my middle name. I guess I have a question for David through you.
Go ahead.
I just want to be clear for the record. Earlier, you had said you were acting as David Forth, private individual citizen. And then, I think in response to Mr. Jones' question, you alluded to the fact that we were here talking about a possible investigation during the summertime or July or something. So my question, just so that we can be clear, is when you called, were you acting as a private citizen based on information that we had at a school committee meeting?
No.
Or were you just, I just need to know, because later on, we want to make sure that the record's clear.
No, I understand. No, I was acting as a private citizen, informing them of what I have when they followed up with me regarding documentation.
Okay.
And that was that. They had nothing to do with anything given during the meeting. Nope. They just asked me for documentation, and I provided it.
Awesome.
That was that, yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Chris?
Just one question, and this isn't for Mr. Forth, and I don't know how we do this, but my question would be, for the record, has any committee member been contacted by any state agency over the last 3 months in any way, shape, or form pertaining to any type of investigation? So I can maybe make that in the form of as a motion, can we just go around and ask that question?
Mike?
I don't know.
No, not in the last 2 terms. I never had anything like this until David got on. I never met a lawyer, never had anything like this. It's been an absolute nightmare.
No.
Chris? Hillary? No. Bob, no. Don?
No.
Chris Scriven? Mr. Colledy?
No.
Mr. Small?
No.
Mr. Simonak?
No.
Mr. Boyce?
No, I haven't.
Oh, these are all parties. No. Mr. Stanbrook, can you hear me? Are you still here?
I am still here, Mr. Chair. No, I haven't been contacted
Okay.
at all.
David? I mean, I have to ask everybody, so I have
Oh,
to
yeah,
ask you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I was like, I don't know what to say.
I'm sorry. Okay, anyone else before we move on? Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming, Lisa. Mr. Stanbrook, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Meeting minutes, September 15th, 2020. I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes, amended with correct names only.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Discussion. Chair Hayes.
John?
I submitted comments of my own, but I noticed on the agenda it said corrected with names only. So I have a question why the statement I made was not entered into the minutes. I don't know, Chair Hayes, if you can answer that?
Which one? Name correction from Whitman resident George Cuffey to Whitman resident? Is that the one?
That was added and
Page
then.
two?
Page 2, yes.
So you want the name corrected from Whitman resident George Coffey to Whitman resident Chris George?
No, what I'm saying is the following request I made to add the statements was not entered into the minutes.
You want me-
Page 2.
So you want me to read the whole thing?
Oh.
Bob, can I explain? So the committee was given recommendations to amend the minutes. So it's up to the committee now to accept those recommendations or choose which ones they want. The only thing I did was correct the names.
So that's the motion on the floor right now, is to correct the names.
Okay, does that,
Michelle, what
That help you,
what would
Dawn?
we be voting on, sorry, what would we be voting on right now? What you gave us in our,
If you want to include the amendments by David and John, basically is what it is.
we would be voting on the,
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I was confused. I thought we were voting on the whole minutes, which excluded the amendments, so.
It's up to the committee if they want to accept it.
So can I clarify my motion to say we'll accept the minutes as presented with the amendments that you were provided in the packet?
Right, because my second one was entered and added into the minutes on page 3 in regard to Attorney Allen. Oh, I'm sorry, no, it wasn't corrected. There it was.
Don, in my packet, I have your email.
Mr. Chair?
wait a second, Fred.
So in my packet, I have your email, and I have an email dated additional request for amendment 915 minutes D. Byers, and then I have one that says D. Ford. So
Okay.
is that all inclusive of all the amendments, or are we missing more
Yeah, the
amendments?
only other problem I see is that you're identifying as doing special needs.
Yes.
yeah, we're not
We're
doing
not
that.
allowed to do it.
Mr.
That's
Small?
that's in this?
Yes, if I could reference on our own Whitman Hanson policy manual, file Baker Edward David George, BEDG, minutes. The minutes of a school committee meeting constitute the written record of a committee's actions, and they are legal evidence as to what the action was. Therefore, the secretary of the school committee will be responsible for reporting in the minutes all actions taken by the committee. Minutes will include a statement on the nature of the meeting, regular, special, the time, the place, and the approval of the last regular and subsequent special meeting, the names of the members present or absent, annotated as to the arrival and departure times during the meeting, a complete record of official actions taken by the committee relative to the superintendent's recommendations to communications and to all business transacted. Resolutions and motions will be given their exact wording, accompanied by the names of members moving and seconding, and a record of the results of the vote. Reports and documents relating to a formal motion may be omitted if they are referred to and identified by title and date. Notation and formal adjournment. Copies of the minutes will be sent to all committee members at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting in which the minutes are to be approved. The approved minutes will become permanent records of the committee. Minutes of public meetings and the minutes of executive sessions that be declassified will be in the custody of the superintendent, who will make them available to interested citizens upon request. and then there's some legal references. I think it's quite clear that we probably have even a little too much within our minutes. Michelle does, a little too much when she prepares our minutes, because it's just supposed to be a representative, of what the actions were during the meeting, and not, per se, the discussion verbatim or word for word.
Respectfully, Chair.
Go ahead, Don.
I'm asking that statements that I made be added because these minutes are lengthy and they detail Mr. LaMartina's reports in great length about his discussion during that meeting, and I would like a brief comment included as far as my statements. That is my request.
Would you read what you would like added, Don? Because I have it in front of me, I'm just not quite sure, so it'd
Thank
be
you.
easier.
Please add the following statements I made during the 9:15 meeting. Dawn Byers stated she did her own research on the statutory method after hearing the term used during a Whitman Board of Selectmen meeting in March 2019. She found Dennis, Yarmouth, and Triton Regional school budget books online which used the minimum local contribution. After being elected to Whitman Hanson Regional School District School Committee, she contacted the superintendent in June to bring the statutory numbers forward and met with him and Christine on July 17, 2019.
Does everybody hear that? Don, this is an addition to, this was not discussed at the meeting though, correct? Did you directly say that at the meeting, or are you trying to add it
No,
to
I
the
s-
minutes,
I
not
s-
amend it? Are you trying to add it?
I said that during the 9:15 meeting, and it
That's
is
what I'm
on
asking.
record. Yes.
You said that specifically.
Yes.
I've got Mr. Cullity first, then Mr. Scriven. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I disagree with Fred. These are just statements. They're not supposed to be in the minutes. Can we just move to accept the minutes? Let's not add statements. They're not supposed to be in there in the first place. These are quotations. It's taken up a lot of time lately on these minute meetings, Let's go, like Fred just said, we'll have Michelle stop giving us details. Somebody wants information, read the YouTube thing. We're not supposed to be putting statements in these minutes. It's, like Fred said, actions, votes, these are comments and discussions. They don't belong in the minutes.
Bless you. Mr. Scriven.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, from Fred apparently just read our policy on meeting minutes, right? Does anyone question that, would be my first, question. And secondly, I guess if not, why aren't we adhering to our policy? And on this last thing here, on 9:15, I don't know how to reference it. It's an email from Dawn to Michelle, October 19th, 2020, 8:47, this here. At the very bottom, it's Dawn Byers asked to go on record that she contacted attorney who represented the plaintiffs and requested to receive. George Coffey was, you know what, I grabbed the wrong page. I'm overwhelmed here, sorry. It's the next page. It's at the bottom of the next page, and it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph down, the last paragraph. It starts with amend page 2, 3, paragraph 5, lines 10 through 11. And then if you read it, it's just Mr. Forth's opinion, or I guess, on what transpired. It really has, I don't want our committee to engage in this kind of stuff. I think it's superfluous at best, and it doesn't leave a good taste in my mouth to be insinuating or accusing people, in the public when they aren't here to defend themselves particularly, I think it's bad practice.
Can I?
We have a motion in a second, and we're in the discussion period. Anyone else? Dawn? I thought, go ahead.
Chris, to follow up your point, I would agree with you in that respect that some of these minutes relate to Mr. LaMartina in his account of conversations with Mars that then said they learned and they informed Superintendent Whitner and Christine Sukow. They're also mentioned in these minutes, and they didn't have an opportunity either.
What's our
to speak on
policy, my
behalf of that.
question, on how to record minutes?
Right.
As just stated by Mr. Small.
Right,
It's that the motions need to be verbatim, so we know how the vote was recorded, not comments. So that's my issue.
Mr. Chair.
Hillary?
I just have, I don't know if it's a comment or a question, or I want to direct everybody to page 3 of the original minutes. The third paragraph is, I assume, Ms. Byers, what you are talking about in your second amendment. So in the original minutes, it says, Dawn Byers asked to go on record that she contacted attorney Alan J. Rom, who represented the co-plaintiffs in the McDuffie case, request to receive the names of all 14 towns to corroborate Mr. Fort's information. When I read that, we're splitting hairs with what we have, what wants to be added, right? I don't know why we need to be so specific, I guess, to piggyback what Mr. Small and Mr. Kearns are saying. It's this, to me, if we're looking for a summary, it's the same thing. I don't understand why we're getting so specific with that, because to me, it seems like it's the same thing. This one is way more specific, and honestly, I think that there might be some privacy issues with the amended one, whereas in the original minutes, it is more general and summative, which I think is the point. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Anyone else? The motion, does everyone understand what the motion is? The motion as I understand what was said, is to accept the minutes as written by Michelle, with no amendment.
That was the original. In an attempt to clarify, I don't think, yeah.
Did you make the
That was
motion?
the motion I made, yes.
And Dan, did you second it?
Yes.
Any further discussion?
No, but Steve, second that one.
No further
Can
discussion?
you explain? I'm sorry. Can you explain what are we voting on here?
The motion is to accept the minutes without any amendments. To accept the minutes as written in your packet that Michelle did, without any of these amendments.
So do I make a motion to accept the minutes with the amendments? Is that what I need to do in order to get my language in there?
Point of order, can we can name special needs children in minutes?
No, you can't.
You can't do that.
Well, I'm making a motion on behalf of my statement that
there's a
I...
motion.
I can't tell what you're.
Motion on the
It's
floor.
Random paperwork all over the place, so like, which,
Mine.
just yours is the Dawn one? Who's the other one?
My amendment.
His name's not on it. He's naming
Dawn?
special needs kids, like,
Dawn is making a motion to amend the minutes to add
just her
statement.
opinions? Great.
Would someone like to second it?
Second.
Second it. Any further discussion? Roll call. Chris?
No.
Dan?
No.
Steve?
No.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
No.
No.
Jones?
No.
Stiffen? Mr. Small?
No.
Mr. Hayes? No. Okay. The amendment.
Chair
doesn't
Hayes, can I
carry.
vote on my motion?
I'm sorry, Dawn. I thought I started with you. I'm sorry. Dawn?
Yes.
Okay. I believe it was 8-2. So the motion doesn't carry. Now back to the original motion of accepting the minutes as printed in your packet. Any further discussion? Mr. Dawn? We're moving to the vote to keep these.
No.
Chris?
Yes.
Mr. Cullity?
Yes.
The reason I'm calling the names out, remember Fred is, I'm not trying to make it lengthy. Fred is remote and it's what we have to do by the rules. Mr. Boyce?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
No.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Stiffen?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes, yes. Okay, those minutes are accepted. Let's go to the minutes of September 30th, 2020.
Motion to approve the minutes of September 30th as presented.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. This is on the September 30th minutes. Any discussion? Mr. Scriven?
Yes.
Ms. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Cullity?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Stiffen?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
I was not here, I was absent, but you do not have to, I'm going to abstain, but I'm trying to say is you don't have to abstain because you were not here, you are voting the document only. So, all right. Thank you. On to unfinished business, structure of public comment.
So way back when, it seems like an eternity ago, I think it was on the 30th that we talked about public comment and the need to engage our public. We do have a public comment policy, and before the committee voted, well, let me back up. I did contact our attorney and said, and he informed me that we, as a committee, it's not by law that we have to allow public comment. He said, what you do is if you have a policy around public comment, you can't pick and choose the meetings that you have public comment. It's there, and there's an established set of ground rules. So we have a policy on that, and I thought before we open this up to the public should know what the ground rules were, so we wouldn't get caught by somebody coming in. Since the governor's policy is less than 25 people in a room, we would be setting this up remotely, either through Zoom or through a telephone call, and letting the public know the parameters of public comment. So everyone has a copy of this policy. I leave it to the committee to say if we want to establish public comment. We haven't done that since the spring, since COVID started. We used to allow public comment. However, we didn't really follow this policy around public comment. So the committee has the policy. I just wanted to bring this up as a unfinished business. So I will know what to publicize out on the district website under school committee revolving public comment.
Mr. Colony.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a motion, we just put this off until COVID is over, seeing how we can't control the crowd set by the governor, because he's constantly changing it. And if we put a policy in place, it's too premature at this time, where it's such a big unknown. So I'd like just to, table this until after COVID sometime, when we can effectively bring it in and do it. Because I don't see us having any public comments, because sometimes we're at maximum as is.
You're making a motion to
Motion to show,
table the
table this
structure
until
of
after
public
COVID's been
comment.
gone. Yes,
Is that correct?
correct.
Second? Mr. Jones? Discussion? Mr. Scriven?
I'm sorry, Mr. Jones first?
Oh, I just
He
seconded it.
seconded the
Oh,
motion.
okay. Yeah, so I just want to, I'm not really clear on what the motion is for. I think it's very important that we try to include public comment wherever, whenever possible. So I don't know that I guess I need clarification on what we're doing, and are we changing something? Are we,
What Mr. Cullity said, and I can let him speak for himself through me to you.
Yep.
But basically what he said is he wants to wait until COVID is over so people can come in public, not on a video, to make a public comment.
Okay, so,
Is that correct? Mr.
Correct, because-
Cullity? Would you,
We're not going to have the ability to have video links in here to effectively do this all the time. And if we wait till COVID, we can bring this down to the policy subcommittee and get this done correctly with all the correct verbiage without wasting time up at the regular one where we can't implement it till probably after COVID anyways.
so then is that a fact? We can't introduce public comment to these meetings remotely? We can't do that?
Can't control
I'm
it.
talking even logistically. Is that what we're stating?
what we're saying is we're gonna go by the policy we currently have, because in the policy we currently have, we don't have any provisions for remote participation. And what has happened in past places, Chris, you could get people that don't understand, that are not standing in front of you, you're not totally
No,
sure.
I understand that. And so I guess what I'm saying is, I would like to make every effort to include public comment.
I agree.
However, I understand that there are some challenges and things we have to consider. But I don't think it's in this committee or this district's best interest just to say, we're not going to allow public comment until after COVID. I mean, the teachers got to go on, the administration's going on, we got to go on. We got to make something work. That's my opinion.
Okay?
I
Go
think
ahead,
David
Jeff.
was first.
CNC superintendent,
So,
he's gonna supersede you two.
So
from
just,
this.
just to add to that, we can make every effort to put this remotely. My purpose for this policy is to inform the public what the parameters of. So they know when they call in and they're on the speaker that they can't disparage a teacher, or we'll shut them off. We will have to have safeguards. What I don't want, and I don't think it's gonna be up on the board with a screen, I don't wanna be, and I'll throw Marshfield out, which they had somebody eating cereal naked at a school committee meeting on Zoom. I don't want that to happen, because I won't be able to do that remotely from here. But I think we can come up with a way, if the committee agrees to the parameters of this, using our policy for remote comment with the safeguards in place, that somebody will be shut off. They won't necessarily be gavelled, that they'll be shut off. But I also agree that it's imperative for us as a committee to get people's input, unless the committee feels like they're not ready for that yet. We can establish something. We'll test it out. If we're not comfortable at the next meeting, I'll tell you right before the meeting that we're not ready technologically to make sure we have the safeguards in place. But I just wanted to assure you as a committee, we can put something in place. It might not be a Zoom, it might be a phone call, it might be emails, if we stick to the policy as written, and people have an idea up front what the parameters are. And I just wanted the committee to review those parameters, because it's not a free-for-all, and it's not 10 minutes on discussion, on something. It's agenda items, it's 3 minutes per person, it's 3 minutes in writing, and it's not a dialogue back and forth.
I've got David, Chris, Dawn. David.
I just wanted to say that I completely agree with the idea that we need to be prioritizing public comment, whether we can have it in person or not, because I think it's essential for parents or students or anyone else in the community to have that avenue where they can speak with us directly. And obviously, we don't have to respond with our public comment policy, but to hear their input, and maybe that's something we deliberate on, something they bring up at a later meeting. Furthermore, the policy subcommittee, me, Don Byers, Mr. Scriven, and Mr. Cullity have been working on a public comment policy that was provided by MASC. We had recommended it to the full school committee, and I think it would be great for us to discuss our current public comment policy and the one the policy subcommittee recommended, and then maybe we can go from there on a process where we're able to have parents or constituents be able to speak during meetings, whether it's through phone, like Jeff said, or through tech, or obviously not in person, but through another method. And I know a couple weeks ago I was walking out of the building after a meeting, and WHCA has spoken to me briefly and let me know that they were going to do everything they can do to implement public comment, and that they were looking into it, and that they would be more than happy to help with us. And I don't know if that's changed, but that was the conversation we had, just briefly leaving the building. And I think we can make it work if we want it to work. And I would really like us to.
Thank you. Chris?
So we already had this conversation. I'm not sure why we're doing it again. We spent 21 minutes at the last meeting. I didn't take word for word verbatim notes, but my bullets to summarize were basically we said live public comment is important. We should have public comment up front right at the beginning of the meeting, right after the pledge and moment of silence. We said it was an opportunity for the public to be heard, not necessarily an interactive dialogue. We talked about different types of communication, specifically general question and answer. We would try and answer on the spot, or if not, take it away. We talked about any type of complaints or agenda items would need to be handled differently in the future. We talked about using Zoom, and we talked about actually doing it last meeting. So we're still talking about it, and now we're not only talking about not doing it, we're actually going back and having the conversation again. So this is why our meetings go for 3 hours. So if we go back to what we originally all agreed to, you can all watch the tape, it's on YouTube, it's all there. We already had this conversation. What we said is we would do it. The policy, I think, speaks in nice general terms to what we can do, and then we probably need to tactically work with the superintendent to come up with a way that he feels comfortable that we could roll this out in a manner that's safe and protects kind of everyone involved, right? So whether that's a phone or a Zoom, you can pull up the Zoom. Unfortunately, you might have to look at the person half naked eating cereal, but maybe you can tape one for the rest of us. You put them on Zoom, they do the comment, we try it, we follow the policy, we move on. So that's my suggestion.
Thank you, Chris. Chris?
No, go ahead, Don, sorry.
No, you were.
Yeah, so I was just gonna reiterate that, just like everything else in a pandemic, there are restrictions. And the public has to understand that, there may very well be restrictions on what they can do, in terms of their comments. But that being said, I just remember sitting here when the principals were doing that presentation and just having those quotes from those elementary school kids and how much, that had an impact on me. Those are our little citizens, right? So, I think it's easy for us to forget how important it is to hear from the public, and we should make every effort to make sure that they're heard, that's all. John?
Thank you. I agree, public comment is incredibly important at this time. We did hear from the principals and the teachers a couple weeks ago. We heard from the kids because the teachers gave us quotes from the kids. We have not heard from families or residents. There is a policy, and we keep referencing this, I don't have it at my fingertips, but it talks about communication within the district and two-way communication. These meetings have been one way. We've been pushing information out again and again, and we need to hear from our families, from our parents. If it's not public comment, I would even support a separate family forum. If they need to call in, if they have questions. We're still new to all of this hybrid. We're just into November. So it's not going away anytime soon. So how can we help our families? Do they have questions? I've seen other districts do this online with call-in just to receive the information. And this updated MASC policy, it does indicate public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue. It is an individual's opportunity to express an opinion on issues within the school committee's authority. Perfect. So I would like to hear from our families. I think that's important.
Dan?
All right, I don't disagree, we should be having something, but this document here doesn't say it's remote. To me, I'm reading this as, they're gonna be here, we can't do that. That's why I'm saying, let's shelve this till we can come up with the policy maybe in the subcommittee, and bring it back so that we can follow the right rules and regulations, because once it's implemented, we can't pull it back out. So if we're not set up for remote, we can't implement it yet.
So I guess that was my question, like, this is our policy as it stands now.
Correct.
Right? Given the fact that we're going through a pandemic, we are changing things on the fly constantly. So what's preventing us from doing something to incorporate public comment into our meetings in some way, fashion, or another that considers all the potential risks and whatnot? And that's my only thing. And Chris, I couldn't agree with you more. I thought we were moving in that direction. So, talking about how we are received and perceived as a committee, we're just spinning our wheels at this point, right? So what are we doing?
Just to let the committee know, you also gave me authority during the pandemic to modify policy. We go. So even to exclude the policy subcommittee, we can make a modification under my jurisdiction, roll that out, and then make it a formal policy as we play it out. So you did give me that authority, and I can exhibit that or exude that or use that authority to modify a policy during this pandemic right now. So.
Chair.
Well, that's what I would look for.
Then Chris?
I think I thought same thing, right, that we were doing this. If I'm looking at the agenda, it says length, format, time at meeting. So I guess my question would be, to the superintendent, what assistance would you need perhaps from some of us to make this happen virtually, right? So I've seen other school committees where they do have a Zoom open and it's in a chat, and they have a designee who reads the questions from the chat, right? You don't have to have your camera on, so if it's on my computer, I don't have to be looking at the person. And I'll tell you, most parents also don't have their cameras on when you are in a Zoom with them. So, maybe we can come up with something like that, because I don't think, Chair Hayes has enough going on, you have enough going on, but perhaps there's one of us who's savvy enough with technology where, to me, honestly, a Zoom would be the easiest way. And you can also, I think that the public outcry if we have people on a conference call and we have to hang up on someone because they're talking badly about a teacher. I mean, I work in another district and I listen to other school committee meetings in that district, and that happens, and it's very difficult and uncomfortable, and we obviously don't want to be put in that situation, but if we did it in a Zoom, you could have the chat there. I mean, we could all be on it, or, you know, so that there's no improprieties for the person who's reading the chat, per se, and then read the question out loud. We have a designee who reads the question out loud and says, there's a question in the chat box. And then if we're going to say time of a meeting, maybe it's the first 15 minutes, the Zoom is open, here are the questions, boom, done, thank you very much, we end the Zoom. Seems easy, right? So, I mean, I would be willing to help. I do work with Zooms and Google Meets on a daily basis, so to me, it's, you know, very second nature at this point, but I just think that we are spinning our wheels. This is very important. It's something that needs to happen. We've already discussed it. I think we decided as a committee that this is something that's important, so let's make a plan to make it happen.
I would say, Jeff, if you're going to make this happen, consider what happens if we have, and this could happen. It's a 15-minute segment we're talking about, correct? Because I wasn't here when you talked about the 15-minute segment. We have 20 people on Zoom that all want to talk 3 minutes. Who do you pick through that gets to talk or who doesn't get to talk? That's one of the problems. And I'm asking.
And that's why I brought this to the committee today, because length, it doesn't say in our policy length. It says 3 minutes a person. So I want the committee to tell me what's comfortable. It's not the old way where somebody would just come up to the podium and we'd look at the clock, and so it is a time frame. Is it at the beginning of the meeting? Is it at the end of the meeting? Our policy doesn't necessarily say that. So I just wanted those parameters, because I just didn't want to put something out at our next meeting and then have it not be done well. I want it done well. So you give me the feedback, what you're looking for, we can put it together. Again, we'll do a test run, George, myself, and Michelle will do a test run to make sure it's safe and the public knows the parameters of how we're doing this. Is it the first 15 minutes? Is it live? Are they speaking to us? Are we going to read it? Those are the things that I just want to get from the committee.
And I think also you may want to consider, Chris, I know you had to hear.
No, that's right.
You also may want to consider putting up what the public comment is, what the parameters are.
And that's
Like,
what
if it's on a Zoom, I'm all for it, so they can read and see, so they know what they can say too.
Correct.
Because it's not fair to let somebody public comment and they make a mistake. We shouldn't be yelling at the public. We should be educating them on what they can do. So I'm agreeing with it. Chris?
I was just gonna say that, like, you know, if we were to start this, it would be our beta version, right? So I mean, it's like, you know, we're gonna have things we're gonna have to work through. And anyone that's gonna, you know, be upset that, or not understand that, you know, is being unrealistic, you know?
Let me do this. I will withdraw the motion, but we need somebody to make a motion to amend, and let's get this fixed tonight.
Mr. Small?
I think it's probably very easily doable. While you folks are meeting in the library and you want to control the amount of attendance, you could do it via, you know, the conference call. And then if we're on Zoom, we can obviously do it via Zoom. If we announce that people need to write in or call in, just to request the phone number or the Zoom link, and we limit it to the first, you know, if we're going to do 15 minutes at 3 minutes per person, we limit it to the first 5 people. We ask someone if they would like to put their comments in writing, perhaps to be read if they don't make the cut or that they go on to the next meeting. That might be something, so as we're not sitting all night. Also, the parameters of what the meeting should be, asking them, for instance, not to name people. We can't bring up anybody's names. We're not there to be, quote-unquote, the complaint police, so to speak. That's not within our charge. And then we need to make a decision as far as dialogue goes. Do we want to have the back and forth, or do we want to use it as a, you know, if there's a question that, you know, we will get back to them with the proper answers, instead of answering it on the spot, but we take everything under advisement and consideration.
Also, Fred, you may have a person on a public comment that only has a 2-second question. So if we keep track of the time, we might be able to take in more public comment. That's something we should consider too. You know, look at the time frame. Chris?
So I think the policy is meant to be set at a policy level. So I think maybe, I don't know, when I listened to Dan the first time, I think you were maybe thinking about this being in public. So I think while it's public comment,
Well-
as I read it again, it doesn't say it has to be in public, it's a public comment, right? Because I think that's different, right? Now, if we come out of pandemic and we approve a public comment policy, then we're gonna have to figure out how we're doing it in person. But I think we can have a public comment policy that is broad and sits at a policy level, and then we can kind of figure it out, because we might, what I would suggest is, I like what Hillary said, for the next meeting, it's 15 minutes, it's the beginning of the agenda, we give everyone a Zoom, and it's chat only. So they can just punch in their question. The superintendent can read the question, right? And if he knows I can answer that question, if it's a 2-second, hey, you know, are we celebrating this day, are we getting this day off? And he feels comfortable answering it, great. If he reads it and it's a complaint against one of his staff members or a student, then he might just say, hey, I got something here in the chat. I can't read it because, you know, it pertains to a specific, that's all you gotta say. Move on to the next one. We do that for 15 minutes, we try it. If we get comfortable, maybe we introduce video someday, but I don't think we wanna put that in a policy. The policy just needs to be broad. If it's, to your point, we get 32 comments, maybe it's not 15 minutes, maybe it's 30, right? So I don't think we wanna put that in a policy. I think we just leave it as I think this policy works. And then we give the superintendent some guidance to say, can we try it with a Zoom, chat only? If you're comfortable doing it, if it's not gonna mess you up, you can facilitate that. We try it at the next meeting. And
I'm very good with that. I just, again, parameters for you guys to tell me what you are expecting.
Right.
So that we do it well. And they have an expectation, and our folks have a general expectation of what we're looking for. So I'm good with that.
But for the sake of time, because you guys discussed this for 21 minutes, I think I heard you say, Chris, and we're getting into that now. I'll get right to you, Dan. So we're gonna let the superintendent, as I understand it, have some latitude with formulating this policy, and we're gonna pilot it and try it and see what's working, what isn't working. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Do you understand it that way, Jeff?
Beta
Dan,
version.
one more comment?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, I'm gonna withdraw
Your amendment.
my motion.
Who seconded it?
Mike seconded it, so he has to withdraw that.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
And my comment would be, I would only want to be using Zoom. You can't really use a conference call because you can't drop people if they're talking. You're dropping the whole system out. So Zoom would be the only thing I would like to see. And like I said, you know, this is, just throw it up into the mixing bowl here for Jeff so he can put it together. This wasn't written like that. That's why I was saying, let's put this off. We wasted time on this already. I didn't want another half hour of this again. Maybe bring it down to the subcommittee, put it all together and bring it back, but if we're gonna let Jeff do that, fine, just as it was written, we can't release this.
I'm sorry, Dan. I thought
You know, no, I mean, as it was written, as I'm seeing this, we couldn't release this to the public right now. Because it only says 3 minutes, and like I said, there's no guidelines to what, when, where, and how.
After this meeting, if you come up, when you go home this evening, or you talk to somebody that might be watching the meeting that comes up with another idea, call the superintendent, talk to him, talk to Michelle, let him formulate this and come up with, public comment's very important. So we'll give them the latitude, is that where we're going with this, and we can move on? We don't need a vote.
I'm good. Thank you.
Everybody good? Any more questions? Okay, thank you. And I think public comment is very important, so. Donations and gifts.
Motion to accept.
To Jeff Simonak and the school committee from Christopher Jones, I would like to recommend that the Whitman Hanson Regional School District School Committee accept the donation of a Chromebook HP 14 Touch Chromebook, 9+ hour battery life, 3.40 pounds, 32 gig storage, 14 dB, 0025NR, chalkboard gray. Its value is $279. This Chromebook has been donated to the Whitman Hanson Regional High School by Brooke and Joel Whitman. Thank you,
Motion.
Brooke and Joel Whitman. I will
Motion-
entertain a
motion to accept.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Small?
Yes.
Mr. Colliday?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Forth?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Sniffen?
Yes.
Bob Hayes, yes. Dawn?
Yes.
Chris Scriven?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
Chair?
Whitman,
Bob,
Oh, we're still in donations? I'm sorry. I just had a question about order. I didn't know if we skipped over community engagement follow-up under unfinished business.
you skipped over it, Bob.
That's all.
I'm sorry, I did. I'm
Yeah, no
sorry.
problem.
Before we move on to the feasibility study, community engagement follow-up items.
So we spoke on the 30th. I'm just looking at Michelle took notes on the 30th. Those community engagement items will be part of our action items of Pillar 5 of the strategic plan. It wasn't finalized when we left. Just want to make sure that we're putting those action items that we spoke about into our strategic plan that we will then present to the committee for votes. It's not a,
Question?
just a,
Anyone?
want to
Good?
make sure we're clear.
Everyone okay? Okay, thank you, Chris. Whitman Middle School feasibility study building committee report.
Fred, that's you.
We haven't met since the last meeting when we reported out. Our next meeting is December 7th, I believe.
December 7th, Fred?
That's correct.
Thank you. Time?
What time do,
I want to say 5 o'clock.
Michelle, is it 5 o'clock? 5 o'clock, that's correct.
5 o'clock. Thank you.
At Whitman Middle in the band room, tentatively right now.
Whitman Middle School in the band room.
That's correct.
Is it 5 or 5:30? I had 5:30. I don't, just for,
5, Michelle, or 5:30?
And I'm looking right now. December 7th at 5:30.
5:30, okay.
5:30.
Okay, everybody good with that? 5:30, December 7th, Whitman Middle School feasibility study building committee report. Report of MASC resolutions. Dawn, I think you're the rep, voting rep?
I
Delegate.
am the delegate attending this
delegate?
Saturday.
yes.
Yes. I didn't know I was presenting at this part of the agenda. This is,
Dot. There are resolutions in your packet
right.
that need to be voted on. Has everybody read them?
Yes.
Mr. Colony?
I only have a problem with resolution number 4.
Okay, can I do them in order? Resolution 1. Dawn is going to go and vote. This is the members of the resolution committee met virtually on June 25th, 2020 to consider resolutions proposed by member districts in the MASC Board of Directors for consideration at the 2020 annual meeting of the association. Members present were a whole list of members. The following resolutions were moved forward by the resolution committee and approved by the Board of Directors. The districts vote on these. Dawn is our delegate. So we're going to have to go through every one of them and vote on it. And then, Dawn, will you just obviously you're going to not make records on how we voted.
Okay.
Thank you. Number 1, without reading the whole amount, you have it in your packet. What's your pleasure?
Motion to accept?
It's MCAS and
High
high
stakes
stakes testing.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Motion, the motion is to,
Fred, maybe we,
the requirement, correct?
Fred, maybe we could do support,
Support the.
right? Either
resolution.
support or not support, because she's gonna have to vote yes or no.
Right.
Yes, it's
Right.
going to be a yes or no vote. Do you support or non-support Resolution 1? Mr. Small?
Yes.
Mr. Colony?
Support.
Support.
Mr. Boyce?
Support.
Mr. Ford?
Support.
Mr. Howard?
Support.
Mr. Jones?
Support.
Ms. Sniffen?
Support.
Mr. Hayes? Yes. Support. Dawn?
Yes.
Mr. Scriven?
Support opposing high-stake testing, right?
Correct.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Small?
He-
You already
He
voted.
supported.
Okay, so that was unanimous. Number 2, COVID-19 state funding. Mr. Small?
Yes.
We did.
You voted this one
We did.
before. This was voted on in the summer.
Brought it to us out of,
So we can pass it? Okay.
Yep.
Number 3, school, excuse me, school committee anti-racism resolution.
Do you want discussion, Mr. Chair?
Do you support that, Mr. Small?
I think
No.
he's asking for discussion.
Go ahead. You would like to discuss it?
Yes, I would like to discuss it.
Okay, go ahead.
I feel that it is too narrow of a picture or a painting, so to speak. I think it, while definitively there's no place for racism in our schools or in our lives, I believe it's very narrow and doesn't address the racism that many different classes face. And I just can't support a resolution that would be so narrow in scope.
Anyone else?
Can we take a minute on this, make sure we're reading this through and we know what we're doing here? Because I didn't get a chance to read this. I don't see where this is, yeah, I don't have a problem with this as I'm reading through
I
it.
think, sorry, can I?
Hillary, go ahead.
Can I just ask Mr. Small, is it the last paragraph that has you hung up? Because if you read the rest of it, it's inclusive.
The last paragraph, there is the second to last paragraph on page 26, they call it. I think it's our page 1. In other words, Asian Americans, feel oppression, quite frequently. If we look at what happened, with the camps back in World War II, that was a horrible thing. And, this resolution doesn't address that. What's happened to the Jewish community, throughout the years. This takes one specific aspect and, starts speaking of it. Black authors, and I agree we should have, very, very many different perspectives. But what about Jewish authors? What about Asian authors? To me, it's just too narrow in scope. And then especially the last sentence bothers me a little as well, because I believe every life matters.
Anyone else? Yeah. Chris, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have absolutely no issue with this whatsoever, and I believe we should do everything in our, power to hear all voices. And if this is the start of what you're looking for, Mr. Small, to include more voices, then I think we should absolutely support it.
Chair Hayes, can I add?
Hillary?
I just wanted to point out, too, that there's language in here, diversity, equity, inclusion, diverse and culturally responsive teaching, workforce. So to me, all of those things address the populations that you were speaking of. I guess I don't see this as being singular. I see it as equity, diversity, diverse culture, and to me, that doesn't, to single a group out is the exact opposite of that. So I think we should support it. Sure.
I agree, but by its very definition, by naming specific races, I think it almost becomes racist. And that's my opinion. You folks obviously feel free to vote your opinions and conscience, and I do mine.
Okay. Don?
I'd like to read into the record, this resolution states, therefore be it resolved that all the school districts in the Commonwealth should guarantee that racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded and practiced for our students, families, faculty, and staff. School committee members should ensure that our school culture and that of every district in the Commonwealth is anti-racist and that acknowledges that all lives cannot matter until Black Lives Matter. That is the resolution.
That's what you read. That's not the resolution in its entirety,
I'm sorry. Right,
to clarify.
right. It's not. All the other things are part of it as well.
Chris?
So I think just, Don read a couple pieces, which is fine. I think if you read the header, school committee anti-racism resolution, I'm not sure we're going to have a lot of discussion. I think there'd be pretty broad support for something around that. I think there is just some challenging language that there's some challenging language, right? So I think this is where all of us have our own individual opinions, and we have to look at that. I mean, for me, when I start seeing things like systemic, that is a problem for me, because when I look at an institution such as this, I'm sure there are some issues, but to cast such a broad net that it's systemic across the board, that's where it starts. I just don't like the word systemic. To me, that's just a problematic word. So I'm fully in support of, I think, the piece that Don read around the equity and inclusion and absolutely, but there are other elements that just are problematic for me, so.
Anyone else before we move to the vote? Dan?
No, I have that same view. I mean, most of this goes, except for when you start specifying one race over all other races, that's racism in itself. I think that's what Fred was trying to say. If like one or two of these little things weren't there, I'd have no problem with the whole packet, because the rest of the packet's saying all, but then you get down to specifying specific races. And, to me, that's a little bit racist itself, because then you're just excluding everybody, you're concentrating on one race then.
So,
Chris, go ahead.
if we have an issue with a particular word in this, and we vote, say we all had a word that we didn't like, then we'd be, we'd vote it down, and then we wouldn't support it, right?
Well,
Are we gonna, I guess what I'm saying is kind of a rhetorical question. Like, do we get the spirit of this? Do we understand, and is anything in this binding? Or is it just to show that, we're conscious of these particular issues, and we'd like to express our support towards ending these issues? That's what I'm saying. This is, as far as I can tell, this is a non-binding document, right? So are we going to nitpick it, or are we going to say, you know what, this is a pretty good idea? That's my question.
Well, that's how we're voting on it.
Well, that's right. So that's what I'm saying. Are we going to say, as a school committee, we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and say that we don't support this? I don't know.
That's why we're voting on them independently.
I'm presenting this as
Yeah,
something
no,
to
I
think about.
understand.
Yeah.
We're not voting on the document as a whole.
Right, right, but I'm saying this particular portion of it.
Yeah, no, I understand totally. Anyone else? Mr. Howard?
So I'm just going to throw this out, and I don't mean this as an act of cowardice. I actually take into account what Mr. Scriven just said, but there is a third option, I think, with any vote. You can vote in the affirmative, you can vote nay, or you can, like the word just escaped me, abstain, thank you, geez, long night already. Or you can abstain, right? And so in this particular case, I agree with what he said. In the spirit of it, absolutely, but someone took the time to write these words, and these words do matter to me. So that's where I kind of wrestle. So, I don't know. I'm going to throw out there, maybe there's an opportunity to abstain, just because, again, in the spirit of it, absolutely, 100%. With some of the things that are written, again, my personal opinion, there's some things that someone took the time to write, and I think they would need to be explained a lot more in terms of what do they mean, and what do those actions mean, and how does that translate to actions that we should be taking? So, that's just my opinion.
Could I ask Dawn a question, Chair?
Sure. I mean, as long as she's okay, you're asking it.
Well, I just meant it through you, maybe. What do you were our rep, you were at this meeting. What is the purpose of this, as you understand it? Why is this before us right now?
I wasn't at the meeting. Are you referring to the date on here?
No, I'm not
Oh,
trying to
okay.
bog you down. I'm just saying, like, I'm asking your opinion. You were at the meeting or a Zoom or whatever it was, right? So,
No, not
I'll
yet.
take
It's
it.
this Saturday.
oh, I apologize. I thought you had already participated in something.
No, it's this week. She's got to go and say how she's
Okay.
going to vote.
Well, then maybe, then it's for us to ponder ourselves then.
No,
But,
I'll address you, Chris. These are just resolutions that the MSAC puts together.
right,
And passes out to everybody.
Yeah.
As resolutions, they're gonna, the committee gets together, our delegates, Dawn. There's gonna be 300 some odd delegates that show up for this Zoom meeting.
right.
And then they pass on what we say.
Sure.
What resolutions do we want? She'll say yea and nay to each one of these. That's all it is.
Then what action's taken from that, I guess is my question.
Then they move forward, whatever these resolutions are, whether they're voted up or down.
But,
Where does it go
Chris,
from?
maybe you can, maybe you understand.
Yeah, so I think ultimately, they will use this through lobbying efforts to work with the various legislative bodies to say, this is what we'd like to have you
Right.
do. So that's where I do think the words matter, because if they say, this is what we said, then they may be looking to pass either a bill or some sort of DESI requirement or something using this language that was then voted in an affirmative or not. So they are going to use this to then push forward with some sort of action. It's not just a poll of like, what do you think?
Understood, and that's kind of why I'm asking. I figured that was the reason. So if we vote in the negative, or if we abstain, I feel as though we miss an opportunity for the bigger picture, the bigger issue at hand. I think it's incumbent upon us to support any effort towards diversity and equality. And it's not necessarily gonna be perfect, but it's gonna, you know, we're gonna be on the right side of this, as far as I'm concerned, if we make an effort to support it.
Right.
Hillary?
I mean, I understand that words, you know, there are some strong language in here, but I think that a lot of people, perhaps in other school committees who've seen this language, are hung up the same way that we are. But I do think it's important that when you talk about, like, the word inclusion, right? We have classes that are deemed inclusion classes for students. And so my only worry, you know, I think we're looking at one piece of it when, to me, the bigger words are diversity, equity, and inclusion when we're talking about educating students in a school, in a public school, right? I mean, that's the purpose of a public school, and I just think that that's what we need to focus on. And I don't want to be on the other side of this.
Anyone else? Okay, so a yes vote will be supporting resolution number 3, and a no vote won't be.
We don't have a motion yet, Chair.
What?
We don't have a motion yet. We need a motion.
Well, then we just.
Well, no,
No, we're just going down the resolutions.
Support or not support.
Right? Yeah,
Yes,
that's what we're doing.
So what are you saying, Michelle?
Nothing, you're good,
Nothing.
Michelle.
Nothing.
Okay, so we're going to continue on. Mr. Scriven?
Support.
Yes. Mr. Colley?
No, no support.
Mr. Boyce?
Support.
Mr. Ford? Support?
Yeah.
Mr. Howard?
Abstain. Not, neither.
No. Mr. Jones?
No.
Support.
No. Mr. Hayes?
Yeah.
Dawn, I'm sorry.
Fred.
Fred.
No.
Fred?
No.
Michelle, what was the count?
Okay, I have 3 no's.
No.
I didn't get Dan Cullen.
You had Fred?
Dan, what did you say?
No.
You got 4. 5. Mr. Colley, what were you?
I was no.
5.
No?
I abstained.
No?
No,
No.
I abstained.
Or no.
No, you're abstaining, okay.
It's 5-4-1.
But that's a,
5, 4,
it's a
1.
normal vote. It's a, so there you go, 5-4-1.
Okay.
So it would be a vote of support then, right? You have 5 in the affirm, who voted yes? Raise your hand if you voted yes.
Yeah.
There you go, there's 5.
You got 5.
She just needs a.
No, she doesn't.
Yeah, but this isn't a motion. A consensus.
Not a motion.
This is,
5, 4, 1.
No, it's just to support the resolutions.
Okay, Michelle? Resolution number 4.
Wait a second, does that prevail or not? Like, so that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Vote in the affirmative.
It's a majority.
5-4-1 is a majority, okay?
As far as I can see. Michelle?
You need 6 to pass something.
You need a 6 for a majority?
But it's not a motion, it's just the resolutions.
Chris abstained, so it's 5 in the affirmative,
4
4 in the negative, and Chris abstained.
But you need 6 for a majority vote.
We're not,
An abstention counts as a no.
So then what would that do?
But you weren't voting, you said.
Doesn't pass.
There's no motion on the floor. Now you're counting votes.
Yeah, I'm only, hopefully she just
counting
needs to vote
support?
something.
David, go ahead.
Right.
So maybe as a committee, we can decide if we're voting as a motion for these resolutions and we need a simple majority, or we are just voting to support this and we need to have at least 5 people or have more yes votes or no votes or one or the other. So maybe we can decide on that.
What's your pleasure? We don't want to be here all night.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? when you, because you went to this conference, so when you go, do they do the same thing we're doing? Like, here it is, what have all this committees talk, or is there discussion about it?
There's some discussion. I think they can even propose amendments on the floor. I
So-
believe the.
So that's a question I would have, right? So perhaps, Don, when you go, you can address the language here and say, you know, my committee
Yes.
reported and had issue with the language that's in here, and see, I do not believe that we would be the only school committee struggling with the language in this.
Okay.
And so perhaps that's a conversation. I mean, we're just making recommendations. We're not voting on motions or anything. So can we make a recommendation for Don to do that as our delegate?
Yes.
Great.
You
Everybody
can ask her
good
to
with
make an amendment to review the
Yeah, I mean,
section.
even to open the dialogue, right?
Right.
That's all.
that? Everybody okay with that? Okay.
I would ask you to share what you would like me to actually say.
What am I saying?
Fair
enough.
I would just say I think it was 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth whereas down, because where it's giving a race, in the anti-race push, that's the only thing I'm objecting to. If they remove that race, I'm good with everything else. When you're selecting one race over others, that's racism.
Which paragraph, Dan, sorry?
It's the 1, 2, 3, the fifth whereas down in this.
Well,
I
will-
still need clarification, though, because I'm not comfortable going forward saying I have one committee member looking to remove.
Well, that's the only thing I object to is having racism in a anti-racism policy.
Go ahead, Fred.
I mean, my problems with this are, that fifth paragraph down, whereas every district will incorporate into their curriculum the history of racial oppression in works by black authors and works from diverse perspectives. And what I believe that should say is works by black, Asian, American Indian, Jewish, by all authors of all ethnicities for diverse learning or diverse perspectives. That's the way I feel that paragraph should read, not continually, confining it to one class. In the very last sentence in the resolution, and maybe this is a personal thing, but I think that every single life is precious and matters. And, I could care less what color, race, creed, religion, anybody is. Their life matters. That's the way I look at it. That's a personal.
Mr. Scriven.
So I'd just say, to Dan's point, whereas every district, it's whereas every district will examine their policies for institutional and systemic racialized practices. Is that the one, Dan?
No, the one Fred was just talking about, where every district is incorporated into the curriculum the history of racial oppression in works by black authors and works from diverse perspectives.
Why can't we just say minority authors?
That would work.
Because we already have, predominantly, I don't know what department.
Yeah, no, that would work if you change that to minorities. It covers everything then.
So I think the challenge that Dawn may have, right? So now, right, what we're arming her with is basically amendments that she'd have to put on the floor that would then have to be subsequently voted by a whole bunch of people that aren't here.
Right.
In
We're not,
second.
right?
In second.
This is gonna be really complex, so,
Not going to be able to do it.
I don't know. I mean, I'm almost suggesting
No
that,
offense.
if we felt comfortable, Dawn could speak to basically, there are some things in here that make a lot of sense, like that first paragraph where all students should have equal opportunity to their rights, I think is, I don't know, if anyone disagrees, speak up, but that seems pretty broad, that the district providing staff, school committee members on diversity, equity, and inclusion of everyone, that seems pretty broad. And then the paragraph that Dawn read, the second to last one, therefore it be it resolved that all school districts in the Commonwealth should guarantee that racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded in practice for our students, families, faculties, and staff. Like, to me, those three paragraphs seem Like, I almost wish they had it at that, right? And I don't know, so it's almost, some of the other stuff, I just feel like we're gonna go back and nitpick on a whole host of stuff. I don't know if there's consensus around those 3 areas, but if it is, then we can almost armor with, we really feel strongly on these 3 areas. There was just a lot of discussion on the other ones.
Chris?
I just think, the meat is in, the action steps that could be taken from this.
Right.
The theory's one, but to incorporate minority authors, that to me, that's important.
But we could, right, but we could, that's something we could
But-
have the conversation to do.
Sure, but all we're doing is trying to support, this effort. That's how I see it. We're trying, we're trying to support the spirit of this effort.
I have a question. I don't know if George or Jeff has the answer to this, but how many African-American authors do they read in the English department? How many texts by African-American authors do they read?
Off the top of my head, I
You don't have that one?
I don't have that one up. I really don't. I can look into that for us, but I,
Because the way that I see, so I'm a high school English teacher, and we have 2 in our curriculum, maybe?
I
Maybe?
know that since the past 2 years with our book bomb pre-COVID, some of the top books that were read in the high school were by African-American authors.
Sure. So one of the things that I look at this, if we're talking about it going to do like legislature or lobbies or things like that, is if there is some sort of mandate that comes down that says, because you have to develop curriculum and you need money to develop curriculum, right? And so that's the one place where I could see this going, perhaps. That's something that I'm working on in my school, developing the curriculum to do these exact things. And I know a lot of districts are doing that, and that costs money and time and people and resources and stuff like that. So, that's another way to say, to take it on, another way to look at it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Anyone else? We've got to move, we've got a lot going on. I'm not trying to hurry you, but, yes?
So, I'm all for meetings and, being brief and all that, respectful of each other's time, but this to me is really, really important and well worth whatever time we put into it to support something, initiative like this.
Okay. Dawn, I kind of have to go with what Chris is saying also. I've been to those delegate meetings. You're not going to be able to get up and change the language because everybody's already voted when you're down there. It's either accept the document or not accept the document, is what it really is going to come down to.
Right.
They're not going to spend probably the same amount of time as we've spent. They're just going to say yes or no. David?
I just want to add that I think the amendment deadline to add to the MASC resolutions is already passed.
Yeah, I think.
So I don't think we can amend anything at this point, to my knowledge.
I think they might be able to do some stuff from the floor, but it's, again, they're
Yeah,
gonna
no
do
problem.
this. They're only gonna spend so much time and, for the most part, they're gonna take the language as is.
Mr. Chair.
Dawn?
So we have the hands raised of 5 in support for noes and 1 abstaining. I'm happy to take, if you all want to email me noes and abstains, your feedback on why you felt that way, because I feel like 5 was the majority. But I'm happy if I have a chance to make comment that our committee had members who felt as such, and I would share that if given the opportunity.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I feel that may be a violation of the open meeting law if we were to be deliberating in that manner.
You possibly are correct.
Okay.
So,
I just,
We
if-
can't, Dawn, I know what you were trying to do, and
Offer,
that's a
yeah.
valid effort.
so,
I just
am
wanna
I,
help.
we've already, yes or no to this, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of, the ship has already sailed on this, right?
Right.
So I just think that's unfortunate that at this congregation of people, it'll be on record that Whitman Hanson School Committee did not support this initiative. I think that speaks something. I think that it speaks to something. That's all.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Through you, Chris, I know for myself, and I can only speak for myself, I'm not supporting it because I think it is narrow, and I think it does contain, too narrow of a picture, and it's not broad enough, and it doesn't go far enough in some cases. That's why I can't support this, because my fear is you support something like this, and you have people that are forgotten in the wind. So that's where I'm coming from. Not that I don't support anything to do with anti-racism. There should be no place for racism in our society today, period. And we should do everything we can to give a diverse, proper education to every student. And every student deserves best education that we can give them. But this does not go far enough in addressing all the different classes that experience racism today and they'll experience it tomorrow.
Thanks,
That's
Fred.
why I'm just so opposed to just painting this and being in favor.
Okay, so any other racial issue we have, Fred, I'm gonna count on you to champion the effort to, support it. Because you obviously are so concerned about, diversity and equality.
Mr. Farrow?
I just have a question, because if you go back to what David said, and the flavor of the support, as opposed to a resolution, and I mean, as opposed to a formal motion in support, wouldn't then, if it's the flavor of support, 541 then be supportive of that?
That's
So
what
I-
I understood.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
So if it's the flavor, like if we're just saying the flavor of the committee on these resolutions is such, then I think 541 would pass. If you're saying we have to follow the rules of a formal motion, then 541 wouldn't pass. So if you can answer that question that Mr. Forth brought up, then I think you can just go with a simple majority. That's just because I'm taking copious notes.
Okay. Let's leave the 541 and go through the rest of the document. Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
For right this moment. The next one, resolution lowering the voting age for municipal elections. It's a long thing, but basically what it's trying to say is let 16-year-olds vote. Discussion? David?
Well, as a young guy, I guess I'll talk first about it. I think it would be a great idea, just because right now, even talking about the election that's going on, the Harvard Institute of Politics has their exit polls going out, and young people voting is at record numbers right now. It's surpassing the record numbers that was in 2018, and it seems to be a growing trend, and more people are being invested in civics education. They're trying to understand what's going on politically. And I know it's a lot of young people in our schools. I know me personally, I registered to vote at 16 because I could. I know a few other people that could. And I do feel like there would be more engagement, especially at the local level, because this resolution is only to allow 16-year-olds and up to vote at local elections like Board of Selectmen, school committee, or whatnot. And I know this year during our town meetings in Whitman and Hanson, we had a plethora of young people, close to record numbers, if not record numbers. But it was just amazing, and I feel like if we support this resolution and get students who are still going to school here involved with issues that are happening in our school district, I think it can only come a good, because then at that point, we have people invested, we can educate them, because in here too, it helps advocate for civics education, which I think would be beneficial to the district. So I guess it's just a little bit of an opening.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Hillary, then you, Fred.
I mean, this aligns with the civics project that 2022 students are gonna have to do, no? The civics, right, I don't know, anyway.
The
Right?
coursework, yeah.
Right, the coursework. However, as someone who interacts with 16-year-olds on a daily basis, I have a lot of concerns. While I agree with points of getting students involved, I just don't know that I support this in that way. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with placing a vote, and I just don't know that a 16-year-old has that maturity. I am not making a blanket statement and saying all 16-year-olds, but I just think that, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and I have concerns because of the population that I work with on a day-to-day basis in regards to that, so.
Anyone else?
Mr.
Yeah, Fred, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think the one thing we need to be cognizant of, you cannot enter into a binding contract at 16 years old and purchase a motor vehicle even. You can't finance, you can't enter into a bank contract for a credit card. There are many things you're not allowed to do as a 16-year-old. There are federal rules and regulations, that are imposed on 16-year-olds. And I just don't know that it would be the wisest thing. A vote is a privilege. A vote is something that's precious. And it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly, number one. And number two, having the capacity to fully understand all the ramifications that go along with that vote. I think, and having those feelings, such as are you, paying taxes, road repairs, exactly what the implications are of what you're voting at the same time. It's important, and I just don't think it should be bestowed on a 16-year-old. And on that note, I think that we do have to do a better job educationally with civics of getting our younger children involved, having them understand how things work so that when they are of legal age, that they are more prepared to be voting and understand how the system works.
Anyone else? Okay, a yes is supporting it. Don?
Yes.
Chris?
No.
Dan?
No.
No.
Mr. Boyce? No. Mr. Forth?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Oh,
No.
No.
Mr. Stiffen? Mr. Hayes? No. Mr. Small?
No.
Okay. Did that go?
8-2?
8-2.
No.
Okay. Number
5.
5. Supporting increased federal support and stimulus funding for public K-12 education. Does everyone understand that?
Yep.
Discussion? None? Mr. Colley?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Forth? Mr. Howard?
yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Sniffen?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Yes. Mr. Small?
Yes.
Ms. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Scriven?
Yes.
Unanimous. Wonderful.
They wrote a good one.
Number 6.
Perfect.
That was 5, right?
Yeah.
Number 6, retention of Medicaid revenue. This has to do with the Affordable Care Act, which has been expanded for health care to millions of Americans, including thousands of mass families without health insurance. It's expending the retention of Medicaid, it's the retention of Medicaid revenue. Discussions. Mr. Scriven,
Yes.
Mr. Colony,
Yes.
Mr. Small,
Yes.
Mr. Boyce,
Yes.
Mr. Forth,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Ms. Sniffen,
Yes.
Bob Hayes, yes. Don,
Yes.
thank you. Another unanimous. Okay, that was number 6. Number 7, attempts by U.S. DOE to direct funding to private schools. In the Department of, this was submitted by Mass Board of Directors, whereas a recent advisory issued by the Secretary of Education is inappropriately interpreted language in a recent enacted COVID-19 relief legislation to benefit private schools disproportionately in the distribution of federal funding for economically disadvantaged students, and goes on.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
Can you just clarify this, that particularly the last paragraph? As I read this, it's saying that if you support this, you support the effort to ask the Attorney General to basically scrutinize the language so that as to prevent, am I correct on that?
Yeah, I'm reading it now. Yeah, right, basically, I believe that's what it, in a nutshell, says.
So, yeah.
Going to petition the Attorney General to review and recommend to the Executive Office of Education and the Mass Department of Elementary Education to review the formal language of such statutes that determine the distribution of federal funds to benefit economically disadvantaged students, and further that the Attorney General provide legal guidance to such agencies in Massachusetts to implement such formulas based on the actual language and legislative intent of the statute, should that be in the variance with any advisory issued by the United States Secretary of Education. Discussion? Mr. Scriven?
Yes.
Mr. Colity?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Forth?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Niffen?
Yes.
Bob Hayes, yes. Ms. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Okay. We're done. They're making it real easy for you all of a sudden. Membership of a school committee member on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, whereas the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education is established to oversee and implement policy related to public education. So it would put a school committee member on that board. Discussion? Mr. Colity?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Forth?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Niffen?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes, yes. Ms. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Scriven?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
9, providing equity for sexual orientation, LGBTQ, in student, teachers, and staff, whereas gender identity is not listed as a protected class in federal laws. And whereas LGBTQ students, teachers, and staff are victims of discrimination, harassment, and at-risk behaviors at rates alarmingly higher than non-LGBTQ in persons. Does everybody understand that? Mr. Boyce? Any
Yes.
further discussion? I'm sorry. Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Forth?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Stiffen?
Yep.
Mr. Hayes, yes. Ms. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Scriven?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Okay,
And yes.
I think we're through the document.
One more.
One more.
Yes, it is.
10.
Go to 10.
Oh, I'm sorry. Relative to the monitoring of attendance of students during the pandemic, whereas the districts are required to have special but comprehensive plan for educating students during the pandemic crisis, and where the students' attendance is an important element of a district plan for returning to school, and school committees apply local policies for student attendance. Discussion? Mr. Jones? Oh, I'm sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, could I ask for Jeff or George's input on this? and how
Certainly.
it affects our district and whatnot?
Go ahead.
So looking at this, so we have to report student attendance to DESI, and DESI holds us accountable for student attendance. This proposal says that if Hillary wants to keep her kids home, DESI's not going to scrutinize our district. That's the way I read it. The accountability piece gives parents the parameters to keep their kids home if they feel that they're ill, and it gives us, I want to say, more or less of a waiver around student attendance.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Scriven?
Yes.
Mr. Colity?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Niffen?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes, yes. Ms. Byers?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Okay, now we're through it.
Thank you.
You good, Don?
Yes.
Okay. DESI District Review Report dated January 2014. It's a 71-page document. Where would you like to start? Mr. Forth?
So I requested this item to be added to the agenda. So for one, I guess the school committee didn't have the opportunity to review it, or the full report when it first came out. And two, after reviewing it, it looked like there was some couple of good ideas on there that I was wondering, as a full committee, we could consider and maybe try to implement. I guess the first one I'll discuss is a joint budget committee. That was one of the things discussed in 2014 about having members from Whitman's Finance Committee, Hanson's Finance Committee, the town administrators, members from the school committee, superintendent, and whomever else. They work together for the rest of the year as a joint budget subcommittee, and they discuss budget throughout the year. And then when we get to February and whatnot, we would meet and go from there. But I think it would be in our best interest if we had a subcommittee that was joint with both towns and the school district, so we're having that constant communication and we have that transparency. And if there's any issues, at least we're dealing with them now in November compared to dealing with them in March or April. So yeah, that was something I really wanted to bring up and hear from the committee. Or perhaps even...
Go ahead, as soon as he's done, Fred, he's still talking.
I was just going to add one more thing. I was just, on top of a joint committee, maybe if the committee's not for that, the report also talks about the fact that we used to have a budget subcommittee, and maybe that's something we should bring back so we can be talking about budget year-round without having to talk about budget during every meeting for the sake of efficiency and effectiveness. Yeah.
Chris?
Volume 12.
Oh, I'm sorry, Fred, go ahead.
No, what I want to say, I believe, isn't that still a valid subcommittee of the school committee? I know this goes back to, I believe, Mr. Trottam, Mr. Krasancic, yourself had established that committee, was it like maybe 2013? If I recall correctly, or 2012?
I have to say that we did, Fred, and we met a few times, and it got to be that the towns weren't truly interested because we started in September, October, November. I think Jeff was around in those days, and there were no numbers. Dan, you're shaking your head, you were there. We sat in this very library and would say, okay, it's September, and I remember a town administrator saying, I have no numbers. There's nothing I can do for you. So we met, and then we met again in November, and we met again in December. And then the governor kept pushing, and I'm not saying it won't work, David, don't get me wrong. I'm just giving you a little history.
Yeah.
The governor kept pushing his budget further and further out, so we didn't have any numbers. So we met, and we went and sat in the Whitman Town Hall and the Hanson Town Hall, and I think Mr. Jones is shaking his head. He was at some of those meetings. I know Michelle came and took minutes at some of those meetings. We didn't have any numbers. I mean, it's a great idea. I think it's fabulous, but we need everybody to cooperate, and I'm all for doing it again, because committees change, people change, and we can try it. Nothing ventured, nothing gained in anything, but there was history to that. It's been tried for many, many times. And I'm all for trying it again. It's 2020.
Well, I love the idea of constant communication, because they are, a big stakeholder. But I think we should be pushing for a 5-year plan, right? So we can forecast what we're going to be looking for. And that'll eliminate, the problem of we don't have any numbers yet. We don't have any numbers yet. Well, if we can predict what the increase in our budget, and we can all agree on that, I think that, we get around, at least in theory, get around that issue of not having the numbers from the state year to year to year. I don't know.
Any idea is a great idea. David, then Dawn.
Yeah, I mean, to bounce off of Chris's idea, I think that's a good point. And I mean, we could talk about that during the full committee, a 5-year plan, but maybe that's something we could also talk about in a budget subcommittee, and not necessarily a joint one with all the towns, but maybe even something that we could work on as a subcommittee. I'm just pulling up some notes I took at the DESI review here. And like, for example, the superintendent, I know this was the previous one, the superintendent begins initial budget discussions with the school committee in September, at which time budget goals are set. The finance subcommittees of the school committee meet throughout the fall. So for example, I mean, even if we were talking about setting budget goals, we as a finance subcommittee or a budget one could even talk about how we can implement that and make that happen and look at the pragmatism of it all. Or something like that. I mean, I'm just throwing ideas. Of course, during community engagement, I recommended liaisons too. I'm just trying to figure out ways that we can be more transparent. We don't have an issue with the budget. We know what the law is. We're all on the same board, not just here as a committee, but just as the towns of Whitman and Hanson and their officials there. But I really am open to hearing everyone's ideas, and I just really want to talk about this DESI review because this was their recommendations after I don't know how long they spent doing the review, but they spoke with a lot of people, and they went to every school district, or not every school district, they went to every school, they did a bunch of studies there, they spoke with many people, school committee members here, I don't know if anyone's still here that spoke with them. But just things like that, like for example, the district and town officials are now consistently engaged in a collaborative and transparent dialogue to establish an educationally sound budget that supports district priorities and improves student achievement. Town officials have sometimes provided limited information to develop the budget. So I think we should maybe review or look at this review and take what it's recommending to us and figure out how we can amend it or approve on it so we can be more effective and transparent as a committee. And then we're also working with town officials so they don't have limited information to develop the budget and that we're collaborative and transparent. So that, just some recommendations, very open to hearing what everyone has to say.
Chris?
Chair.
Wait a minute, Fred, I already got Chris, and then you, and then Dan.
I'll go after Chris.
Chris?
So, I think, it's funny, because I was looking at Hillary, I think her comments at the beginning of the meeting of making sure we're not losing sight of kids, and we kind of maybe refocus some of the energy that we're spending on legal matters and/or financial matters coming back to what's really important in terms of education. So while, I'm certainly in support of the financial aspect, I do think we really need to kind of rethink where our focus, priorities, and energy is going. So I think community engagement in terms of how we engage with the communities will naturally lead us to some of the budget conversations that we need to have. And I also think, I don't know how often DESE comes in, but this report now is
6 years old.
6 years old. So, I would really need to understand, this is a point-in-time analysis, right? So when I look at audits, deal with them all the time, it's point in time. So I would need to really understand what's transpired over the last 6 years and, it's hard for me to take a report that's 6 years old and then just take it on, a prima facie, this is what they said, does it apply now? I think in general terms, like transparency, absolutely, of course, but specific items, I don't know, it's hard for me to do that. But I would be interested on how often they come in.
So just to go on that point, so far, and the subcommittee might be good, I don't know. I think one of the things Michelle and I spoke about a subcommittee is all 10 members last time wanted to be on the subcommittee, because you all want to be involved in the budget and have an understanding of the budget in every aspect to talk to your people. So that's why it kind of deviated. We used to meet, my first year we met with the town administrators to talk, and that's when things were held very close to the vest. This year, after the experience of the fiscal 20 budget, I think we made effective change. I now have a liaison to the Whitman Board of Selectmen, which is Mr. LaMontina. I have a liaison, Mrs. Otina, from the Finance Committee. I'm looking forward to having the same from the town of Hanson, so that we can, even informally as a superintendent, assistant superintendent, business manager, without having a quorum of school committee members, kind of share with them where we're going. Both the town of Whitman did a full financial review. I have those numbers about where Whitman is in their projections of 5 years. We also, remember, did the Mars review for both towns of Whitman and Hanson, so we have an understanding of their finances. So I look forward to those conversations this year, so we don't get backtracked to where we were last year. So I think we've already established some communication lines that haven't been there in the past. Mr. Stanbrook is new, and Ms. Green is also new. So as Bob said, there has been turnover, and I'm hoping to have those lines of communication open to discuss budget. One of the things that I mentioned earlier on, rather sarcastically in September, is all we do is talk money here, and all we do is talk budget. So I'd like to move forward with those with those people in charge of the finances in the communities, and bring that back informally and formally in budget presentations here, so that you folks can make effective decisions on where we want to be. I agree with a 5-year plan. We were trying to put together a 5-year plan of expenditures, and we got sidetracked last year. I think if we we move forward with our regional agreement, we have an idea of where the assessments are, and we can also now project our 5-year plan with more factual data. So just to answer you, David, that's where we're at with communication in the two communities. And I think it's been tried in the past. It was a laughing joke with Mr. Trotter. He always tried to do that, and both communities would never come to the table. with anything. And I think we have an opportunity to branch out on that this year with the liaisons that have been assigned from the two communities.
Hillary?
I just probably to echo some of what Chris said, but, you know, when I got the document, I said, oh my gosh, a 73-page document, what am I looking for in here, right? And it's 6 years old, and as an educator, I'm looking at it going, oh my goodness, they didn't have these kind of assessments, they didn't have this, they didn't have that. I guess my question to Mr. Forth, or I don't even know if it's a question, but I think having your idea is a good one, but why does it have to come from this document? Like, do we need, I literally was scouring this document going, what am I supposed to be looking for? 73-page document when, if you want to suggest that, committee, I think that's a good idea, and I think, again, it's a 10-minute conversation. This is a good idea, so what I want to do, let's move on. I think that there are quicker ways that we can be
Yeah, well,
doing
let
things.
me provide some clarity, if you guys don't mind. So the reason why I want to go bring up this DESI review is because when it was first brought to my attention, some of the things they had discussed in there was the regional assessment, and that had turned into a big issue last year. And if we had read this review, or that, that committee back in 2014, 2015, and we were going through that process and doing what DESI recommended, perhaps we wouldn't be in the issues that we are. We wouldn't have the issues that we had now. Back to Chris's comment about student achievement, why I believe we need to talk about finances and have a budget subcommittee is because Chris and Hillary are right. We shouldn't be sitting here talking about finances every meeting. And Jeff, too, he made that point, which is why I think a subcommittee would be best to have that, those type of meetings. And I'm not saying we need to have them every week. But to my point too, student achievement has diminished over the years, and a lot of that has to do directly with the budget. And that's kind of the point I'm circling back to is, every year we're cutting, minus last year. And I think we need to develop better practices and a better relationship and understanding, not just with our elected officials or, us as a committee, but with our constituents, our students, and the process we go about that. So that's why I was just recommending that from the DESI review. And because DESI was the ones themselves recommended it, I figured who else better to listen to than the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. But I do understand too, at the same time, this was 6 years ago. The only reason I'm talking about it now is because we never did, and I don't think the full committee was actually aware of this report, judging from what was said on September 15th, that meeting. So I wanted us to talk about it, just go over it, and yeah, so I just wondering what everyone's thoughts were on what DESI had to say and the idea of a budget subcommittee.
Chris and then Dawn?
I just think,
Forgive me, Bob.
And I'm sorry, Fred.
I know this has been discussed in the past, and as Jeff has mentioned, and I just think this is another area where oftentimes smaller groups get more done, and we've hired Jeff, and we put him in charge of, being the CEO of the district, and I think it would be more prudent to have him meet with the town officials and with the idea that there's probably going to have more open, real discussions going on that could be, that could make some progress.
I've got 3 or 4 in front of you, David.
You can go to
Dawn?
Fred.
Fred?
Yeah, well, what I want to bring up is, from the past failures of the budget subcommittees is more related to the revenue side and not having any revenue projections. One thing that had occurred, last year I believe it was, or even a little prior, was Randy Lamartina headed a budget override committee that did a deep delve into the Whitman finances. They have a document known as the Madden Report. I believe Dawn was on that committee and Jeff was on that committee. And the one recommendation out of that committee was that the school budget increase 5%, or I should say the operating budget increase 5% on an annual basis. That gives us a little bit of a roadmap as to what the town of Whitman feels is affordable. And if we start and can start to do perhaps 2 separate paths, so to speak. One is, what does our administration feel is needed on the educational side and what the cost is? And And then we know what our, somewhat fixed costs are. Salaries are our biggest expense. We have a bus contract, we have SJ services, we have the copy center, and we have generally an increase within our health insurance and other insurances. So we do have an idea that we can gauge, and that way there perhaps we can make the budget discussions much easier. I think a smaller panel discussing the budgets with both towns can get more accomplished in knowing what we have to work with. The other thing, and if you guys want to whack me in the head, go ahead, I've said it a few times, if we look at what's in our operating budget that can be considered a capital expense, the report that they did from Bridgewater a few years ago identified that the public would rather pay on either a debt or a capital exclusion for very specific capital projects. Curriculum can be considered that, some of our IT needs, etc. So that we're taking out of our annual operating budget things that may not be a recurring expense and are able to maximize, what we're spending on an annual basis, yet we have still the ability to purchase the things that we need to purchase. We're just purchasing them outside of the operating budget, so to speak, and considering them capital. Just want to throw those items in there.
Dawn,
Thank you.
then Dan, then David.
I think the DESI review report is still important and relevant, even though it was 6 years ago, especially in regards to the recommendations to how the district should be working with the towns. We talked about partnership. We need to collaborate more with the finance committees. I believe in a budget subcommittee. I think it's important. And we know what the numbers are. Department of Revenue has the town numbers. We know Hanson annual budget is 30 million. Whitman is 40 million. They've ended their years this past year with 1.9 million in free cash in Hanson. But last year, the general statement was they couldn't afford the assessment. So it's important that we look at the numbers and not listen to generalized statements. The information is there. The DESI report does indicate that the superintendent and principal stated that the district and the school improvement goals and student needs are not being met due to inadequate funding. That's the real issue with reading that district report. It happened for 6 more years, so I hope now that we're on this path with the statutory method, but we need to meet with both towns, and we need to continue to do that together. I would like to see some type of budget subcommittee established just to go forward in looking at these things. Again, another thing that the district review report mentioned was the unused tax levy in the towns. This was in 2014. Before I was elected to school committee, I stood up at Whitman Board of Selectmen in 2019, stating that there was an unused levy of $3 million for the previous few years. These numbers were out there, so they're still there, and it's important to get our students what they need. And to talk about education, we need the funding as well. They go hand in hand.
Dan,
Yeah, it's been brought up, but we have tried many times, it goes back to like Mr. Trotter days, to have school committee, FinCom from both towns, selectmen from both towns, town administrators from both towns. You get your one meeting in, maybe 2 if you were lucky, and then they don't show up anymore because nobody would have numbers or were willing to go with anything. Don't know if that's going to change. And number 2 thing, we did have a budget subcommittee. The last time we met was 7 years ago. I was on that. We never had it after that year. That should be brought back. I never figured out why we never had the budget subcommittee after that first year I was here. Because you do the work there to bring to the committee.
I think part of it, Dan, was many times it was mentioned, and as you just said, we couldn't get cooperation to come forward, but there's no reason not to try it again. If you tried and failed, you gotta try again, that's all. David?
2 things. I just wanted to go back to Chris Scriven's point. regarding how it might be, quote me, let me know if I misquote.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
okay.
fire away.
I was just saying that, you're making the point that it might be easier or more efficient to have less people in constant conversations regarding the budget, like the superintendent. But, and Jeff, again, now, if I misstate you or misquote you, please correct me. I believe there was one meeting recently where you did state you are only one individual and it would be beneficial to have more people advocating and out there. I think it's not just your sole responsibility to be placed in the budget, it's us as a committee, and any way we can to help you out so you're not solely in charge, I think would be beneficial, because it shouldn't be just, you shouldn't have the pressure of the budget solely on you, for you to carry. And I do think a budget subcommittee would be our best approach. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to establish a budget subcommittee.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Howard?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that concern me. So one is, I don't think committees solve problems. So we can create as many as we want. I'm not sure money's going to start just shaking from the trees. I still think it comes back to the community supporting what the schools need to do. And I think our energy should be completely directed to making sure that we're engaging the communities, they understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, because then I think the funds will come. I've watched it for the last several years. We can sit there and say, this is what you should spend. It's not going to do a darn thing. So that's one thing. The second thing that concerns me is when we talk about subcommittees, I think based upon a plethora of recent events, one of the concerns I have that Mr. Scriven articulated better than I could was we have folks that are acting like individuals and want to do their own thing. So if we're creating a subcommittee so some individuals can do their own thing, completely outside of what the will of the committee is, then I don't see a lot of value in having a subcommittee. What's that?
I said that's speculation, Chris, to say.
It's my opinion, so I can share my opinion. I can watch the actions of, I just watch actions. I can listen to words and then I watch actions. So I can hear, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and then I hear, for example, well, Whitman has a 5-year plan, Whitman's doing 5%. I didn't hear any conversation about Hanson's 5-year plan or what Hanson's agreed to do, and I do know that it requires a partnership in both towns, or we end up maybe where we were a year ago. So I think we still have some work to do before we establish a whole bunch of people and just start going in a shotgun approach of doing different things. I think we could get there, but right now I really think the focus should be on how do we work with the towns more broadly than just on the financial standpoint. That's just my opinion.
Chair Hayes.
Mr. Chair?
Don first, Fred, and then you. Go ahead, Don.
I think we can do community engagement and a subcommittee at the same time, and a subcommittee does not have any authority over the full committee. They have to report back to the committee.
Mr. Small?
I can agree with Mr. Howard to an extent. I think that any subcommittee that we have has to be cognizant of both towns and should have participation from members from both towns, so that we're, not leaving Hanson in the dark, nor leaving Whitman in the dark. I do apologize, I do know the Whitman situation is a little bit better than I do in Hanson. I live in Whitman and, follow what's going on in my own town a little bit more. But that's where we need to lean on the Hanson representatives to be very vocal and vibrant parts of a subcommittee.
Hillary?
I have, excuse my ignorance about subcommittees, but I'm looking at our agenda and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 committees, subcommittees that we already have. Am I missing, are there any on here that I'm missing?
Negotiations will be 4.
Okay. Oh, did I count policy twice then?
No, but on
I
negotiations.
counted
We'll
negotiations.
have 4 different committees.
No, 5. Regional,
That's 5.
negotiations, insurance,
Within the
Within
negotiation.
You mean within
negotiations,
negotiations, there's
subgroups.
4? Okay, so, I don't know, maybe because I have small children and a full-time job, I'm just wondering where we're going to have the time to have these meetings. I also am concerned, as Chris said, I think that our job as school committee is to take recommendations from the superintendent whom we've hired in so much as what the budget is, right? We need to be really careful that we're not dictating to the towns, you must spend this, you must spend that, right? We need to be cautious of that narrative because it's going to backfire. we need to listen to the superintendent and the assistant superintendent who say, this is, and we help with these policies, but these are the policies, these are the programs we'd like to run for students, here's what it's going to cost. Our job is to engage the community and explain to them the benefits, not necessarily to dictate to them what they should and shouldn't spend or how they should or shouldn't spend their money. I think that this is coming off of the year that we just had, and I only joined the school committee in June, so I really have no clue what last year was like for you all. I think that it sounds to me that the budget needs to be a bigger discussion and not just, how many people make up a subcommittee? Does it depend, or?
I would envision 2 from Whitman, 2 from Hanson.
Yeah,
I'm sitting here taking all this in.
To make a 6th subcommittee and then to find time to meet and then to, come back, and I understand the subcommittee does say all kinds of things, but the subcommittee does take recommendations and bring them back, right? So
Yes.
I don't know, I just feel, I guess I'm echoing Chris's sentiment with the subcommittee, budget subcommittee in particular.
Anyone else? David?
Well, I just add, I don't think a budget subcommittee would necessarily dictate, wouldn't be us saying, Hanson, you need to pay this much, Whitman, you need to pay this much, but I think it would, bring us to the table where we can have that dialogue and consistently have that dialogue throughout the year about where everyone is at, the school.
But that's my question, it wouldn't dictate, I'm sorry, that's my question, it wouldn't dictate what they're gonna pay, but we would have that conversation and see, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm unclear as to what the objective of the budget subcommittee is, and I live in Hanson, I was there in the spring, and the optics that are happening, and I just think we need to tread lightly, and I'm not confident in what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing in actions in so much as having a budget subcommittee, having 4 people, even if it's representation. I'm not comfortable with it. And I'm just one person, I understand that, but.
Chris?
So I guess just to follow on, Hillary's last point, what is the purpose of this committee or subcommittee? What are they actually doing?
Well, I guess at that point, we would need to talk about where we're at as a committee and what our goals are and align with that. And I guess we would work with the superintendent and assistant superintendent and the town administrators and finance committees to see where they're at, what their financial situation is looking like, where those numbers are at, where our numbers are at, or what we're trying to request for a budget. I know we're not there yet, but basically what I'm trying to say is the idea of a budget subcommittee would be so we're knowing where everyone's at, where we know where Hanson's at, we know where their revenue is, we know where Whitman's revenue, because in the DESI review, it's clear that one of the biggest issues in that report was lack of clarity regarding the budget information. So at least if we have a budget subcommittee, we have that dialogue and we know where everyone's at and we know what the numbers are. And if we don't know what the numbers are, or at least we know that we don't know, and we know that nothing's being withheld from us. Because another thing in that report was that they said that town officials were not being forthcoming about the budget. Well, that won't be necessarily a major issue if we're having budget subcommittee meetings.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
The other thing I think would be good for a budget subcommittee is to share information. Not only, I look at it that it would be sort of spearheaded by our superintendent, not to put something else on his plate, but he's going to have the one that's going to have the greatest grasp of the knowledge of what his goals and aspirations are and what's been built into the budget. But also, for instance, Student Opportunity Act. Over the next several years, that's going to increase the MLC in each town, by about $700,000 individually. So there are going to be some, some good increases in what the towns are going to have to be paying, just on the foundation formula. And being able to talk with the administrators and go over that as those numbers come out. As the governor's budget comes out, perhaps before our, original meeting, because that's what we base everything off of. And is there any deviance? Have we been the lucky recipient of a reasonable reimbursement for regional transportation? What circuit breaker at? And being able to share that information with the towns as well. So I think a small budget subcommittee could be a very effective tool in not only providing information, but also you could say it steps up to community engagement, because now I believe the town administrators will be reporting out to their entire boards at their meetings, which are televised, and it goes to show a real true partnership.
Thank you. Chris?
So I'm pretty sure I just heard Jeff say that, enthusiastically, that there's a liaison to the Finance Committee, the two new town administrators. He's looking to engage in an ongoing dialogue with all parties. I just don't understand, and I have the utmost confidence in our business manager to be up to date on all the laws and regulations and whatnot. So I don't understand why we couldn't just get a report from Jeff on how we're progressing on the budget. And if we had specific questions that we wanted him to address, like a 5-year plan, or I'm sure he would take that to those parties, discuss it, and report back to us. I don't understand why we have to do anything more than that.
Anyone else about, I have a motion and a second to form a budget subcommittee. Is there any more further discussion on this? Jeff?
No, my only concern is time. Because according to what David was proposing, again, I'm all about transparency, but the contact with both town administrators, finance committee, and selectmen liaisons, and then reporting to the budget subcommittee, who will then report to the school committee. That's 2 additional meetings that I have. On top of building committee, which we want a new middle school, on top of negotiations with all 4 unions this year, and the budget coming up in COVID right now. So I'm getting nervous about my time, Michelle's time, George's time, John's time, as we try to formulate a budget that we don't know anything about next year. So that's just my angst. I'm really looking forward to working with both towns in these liaison roles this year, and then reporting back to the committee. That's just my concern. And I know George wants to be heard.
Go ahead,
Whatever.
George. Go ahead. You're up.
I guess my other question would be is what are the roles and norms of this new budget subcommittee? Because a lot of times, the budget is made in connection with the educators who are hired. So it's made with the administrative team, it's made with the assistant superintendent, the business manager, and you take feedback and input, but then you're looking on what are your internal goals, what do you see, and then how do you put that to move forward? If that's one thing that's then presented to the budget subcommittee, where does that then go for their input from all those pieces, from the school committee pieces, from the liaison pieces, from all those pieces, to then get wrangled through, massaged, changed possibly, to then come back, fix it again, and go back? I just wonder where all those pieces interplay, and then the piece of time. So I'm just not sure about all those things.
Okay, Dawn. I'm sorry, I almost went by you again.
No, that's okay. Maybe to comment on George's comment, we could ask our MASC what recommendations are in forming budget subcommittees, what their agenda look like. There are other regional school districts around us. Look at what they're studying on their budget subcommittees and other school committees. I know they are doing this. They have budget subcommittees. I'd ask Superintendent if you've heard from Hanson FinCom. I know last spring, there was a period of time where we had not heard from Hanson FinCom at all, and it is concerning to me. I would like to hope that we have open dialogue, but based on how, the period of time went last year, there was not open communication.
I haven't asked because we haven't started a budget conversation yet.
Fair enough.
So I would hope to do that after Thanksgiving and meet with our folks and just ask that question. I know the chair had a conversation with the chair of the FinCom, and they're more than happy to have conversations.
I called Mr. Sullivan and told him about Whitman having a liaison and what was Hanson going to do. And they're working on it. I'm assuming they're going to send the liaison, which I think is a good idea from both towns. I know that Mrs. O'Teen is the liaison. In fact, she's here.
Well, she left. She's got a 9 o'clock curfew.
Yeah, right.
Kind of like what we were hoping to do.
Well, we've got to get rocking because it's 9:40 and I've heard from all committee members that these meetings are taking way too long. And we still have quite a bit. I'm tempted to table some of this stuff if we don't have to do it and get right to the executive session. Because we have to get rocking.
Move the vote.
So I have a motion
Oh, sorry.
and a second on the floor to form a budget subcommittee. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. John?
Yes.
Chris? No? Mr. Colony?
No.
Mr. Boyce?
No.
Mr. Forth?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
No.
Mr. Jones?
No.
Sniffin?
No.
Mr. Hayes? No. Mr. Small?
No.
Okay. Michelle, Dawn, did you, Michelle, what was the vote?
8-2.
820 doesn't
It didn't
carry.
pass, okay.
Sorry, I don't know when I voted.
I do think that, I'm going to pass on that comment. Anything further on the DESI district review, excuse me, report? Before I move on. Okay. Pilgrim Area Collaborative, is that real quick?
Yes, I'll be very,
That's Mr. Boyce.
yes. So we're having our second meeting of the school year tomorrow night. We had the first Thursday in October. Yours truly became the secretary, was nominated and voted. I am also the budget subcommittee for the Pilgrim Area Collaborative. So I do meet twice a year with the executive director and the treasurer, business manager, and I believe we may have one other member. And that's worked over the years. We did have our auditor show up, and we also had our trustees meeting. Because we're all members of the trustees, the representative is the former executive director, Maureen Goggin. And things are going well, and we're going to bring up discussions tomorrow night regarding, how our start of the year has gone and so forth. Don, as our alternative, and myself have received a couple of updates from the executive director by email, and we are still on Zoom, so we continue that way
Okay.
with PAC, and that's it.
Questions for Mr. Boyce? Seeing none. Facilities?
Just briefly,
We haven't met since last meeting that we reported out.
Thank you, Mr. Small.
Fred, we never reported out. Oh,
No, we didn't?
No, we passed over from the 30th. So I was just going to briefly report. Ernie talked about the generators at both Duval and Conley, that monies have been encumbered, but we have to look at conservation to where to put those generators. We're going to expedite that because we've had multiple power issues in Whitman so far this fall. We had the elevator fixed at the high school finally, and we're updating our capital matrices to show projects in progress, projects completed, and when dollars were encumbered from the towns. That's all that happened.
The only thing I'd like to add is we do realize that the monies that are encumbered for the generator will not be enough to purchase 2 generators as the town of Whitman wants to do instead of one that could go on a truck back and forth. And we do owe them a estimate so they can get on the springtime town meeting.
Thank you.
Is that all?
That's it.
That's good? Fred, good? Everybody good?
Yep.
Policy Subcommittee? Dawn?
Sure. So you have recommendations from the Policy Subcommittee. We met on September 28th and October 21st. These recommendations are to amend existing policies with standard language. Some were grammatical corrections, to adopt 2 new policies that you have copies of, and to delete policies that a couple of them are redundant or unnecessary. These are recommended by MASC from January 2020.
Mr. Chair?
Excuse me. Yeah, go ahead, Fred.
Do we have copies of the old language and copies of the replacement language? Because I could not find those in my packet.
The adopting the new language as educational opportunities for military children, updated language for DESI compliance. This would be a new policy for the Whitman Hanson Regional School District. There is no policy current. Educational opportunity for children in foster care, updated language for DESI compliance. This is also a new policy, Fred. Deleting,
Now, I see where it says updated language, like curriculum development, policy IGA, policy BEDH, public comment that we were speaking of earlier, updated language for DESI compliance. Just don't know what the old one was and what was being struck out and what's being added, that's all.
Right, in a previous, Michelle, go ahead.
In February, you received all the tracking that MASC sent us. They did a tracking document so you could see what the changes were. And then again, the last meeting, and so if you need another copy, Fred, we can send those to you. But he did provide the tracking documents and the changes that MASC sent us.
get that, Fred?
Yeah, I don't have it from last February, and I'm just looking in my folder here for last meeting.
Go on, continue, Don.
I'm finished. Are we looking for a vote, Michelle?
Yes.
So I'll entertain a motion to accept the policies as amended, adopt the new policies, and delete policies as listed on the recommendations dated 11/4/2020.
I'd entertain a motion to accept the policy subcommittee recommendations as printed in your packet.
So moved.
Second.
Discussions. Mr. Scriven?
Yes.
Mr. Spires?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes, yes.
Yes.
Ms. Sniffen? Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Forth?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Abstain.
Mr. Cullen?
Yes.
Okay, that passed, thank you. Insurance Subcommittee.
We need to set a meeting,
Okay,
and I would ask Mr. Tuffy if he could get presentations from the GIC and perhaps Mayflower, so as well as copies of our policies so that they can be reviewed by the subcommittee, hopefully in electronic format. But if we could have be able to set up a Zoom meeting with both Mayflower and then subsequently with GIC or vice versa, so that we could be able to look at what policies that they have available and what costs are, et cetera.
Mr. Tuffy is shaking his head, Fred, I know you can't see him.
Okay,
He's shaking it in the affirmative, I should say.
okay. Thank you.
Wait a minute,
And,
listen.
and once we get that, we'll send out a meeting notice and go from there.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Actually, I'd like to suggest that I get some information about the policies, rates, but that Trevor distribute that to the subcommittee so that they can look at that first, and formulate some questions, and then we can arrange for a presentation on it, provide whatever seems to make the most sense.
Great. Mr. Howard, thank you.
I think Mr. Tuffy covered it. I was going to suggest that perhaps the subcommittee needs to meet and establish what they're doing before we start doing stuff, because I don't think they've met. So I'm not sure where the direction to do all this is coming from. So perhaps the subcommittee should meet, establish what they want to do, and then we should do it. I don't know, Fred, unless you're thinking something differently. I don't recall that committee meeting and establishing what they're trying to do.
Brad?
Which I'm fine with. I guess we could do that as well. I thought we were going to review all policies and all insurances available. Maybe I was misinterpreting everything. I'm sorry.
Well, I think they should meet and determine whether you want to go, and then,
Doesn't have to be a long discussion, but
yeah,
probably.
so get together and meet.
And perhaps Mr.
That
Tuffy.
was continuing on from last year's insurance subcommittee. That was one of our goals and one of the things we were supposed to be doing that it just never got kicked off the ground. It might even been a year and a half ago, now that I think about it, 2 years ago.
Okay. All right, negotiation subcommittee, we need to form one. So, I think we probably, and again, I'm throwing an idea out. Maybe we should have 2 from Hanson, 2 from Whitman to negotiate. What's your thoughts? Everybody's pretty quiet.
What are the qualifications you look for?
There are really,
Don asked what the qualifications were. We're looking for a Unit A subcommittee to start negotiations. The union has written a letter to ask for us to start collective bargaining. Our contracts, Unit A, B, C, and D, expire June 30th.
I would do that again, Mr. Hayes.
I'll do it.
there was discussions about, and this is ongoing, I'm just giving you some history from several years of it. There used to be discussions where 3 people would meet or 4 people would meet, and then each one would go to the other smaller units. But then it was suggested this year, and I believe it was actually suggested by, when we met in our workshop, that they meet with every unit, Glenn Kuchar, that all 4 of them meet and just get it done. Because once they're impaneled, usually what happens is you meet with the biggest group first, which is the teachers. And once you get that contract kind of nailed down, so to speak, then you meet with the rest, and it's sort of, they're smaller units, they tend to
Feed
look
in.
and see what is going on and
Okay, follow along.
fall in line a little bit, and I hate to use that term, but,
Okay.
so, do I have 2 people from Hanson that would like to be on the, yeah, John?
I just have. Oh, I'm on record? I'll take this off, maybe I'll sound a little clearer. You're talking about forming a subcommittee to negotiate with the unions. And my understanding of Chapter 150E says that if the negotiating subcommittee comes to a tentative agreement that they're going to recommend to the body as a whole, that they must vote for that when you meet as a committee. Which is to say, if you have 4 of you, 4 school committee members on a negotiating subcommittee, that's 4 positive votes when you go to vote on it as a whole. You may or may not be comfortable with that. And so what you might want to think about is 1 member from each of the communities, if that's what you're doing. And then, of course, executive session, so you can get a flavor from the entire committee as to how the committee feels about the progress you're making.
1 from each community?
Well, the issue being, if you start with 4 positive votes on a tentative agreement, it really goes a long way towards having that negotiating subcommittee empowered to essentially bring a final product before the committee as a whole, because it just takes 2 more votes from the other 6 members to make it a...
Yeah, and you've got it done.
Yeah, you got it done. Whether you're comfortable with that or not is your choice, but I just pass that along.
Mr. Howard?
Yeah, so just so I understand, because I'm not sure we've necessarily done it this way in the past, so this is helpful to understand. What I'm hearing you say is, if you have school committee members on the subcommittee, they agree to something.
Come to a tentative, usually...
Then when they come to the full committee, they can't vote in the...
Well, if they come to my understanding is, if they come to a tentative agreement with the union on terms and conditions, whatever you happen to agree on, and now it's time to vote to approve that contract, that they must vote in the affirmative because they're recommending it to the committee.
They've already come to an agreement.
They've already come to a tentative agreement,
When they
and
commit
therefore,
is what he's saying.
Okay.
therefore, to meet the standard of bargaining in good faith, they can't not recommend it.
I understand, so I hear what you're saying, I'm just not, at least I was not under that, I didn't know that, so that's new to me, so thank you.
Well-
I appreciate you sharing.
That is my understanding, and of course, we have Labor Council, and we might want to run it by them.
I feel like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I feel like Glenn Kuchar mentioned that last week also. I
Yeah.
feel like that's not the first time that I've heard that.
Excellent,
So.
thank you.
Does everybody understand what John said?
And by the way, that doesn't mean that frankly, all 4 people will agree to a tentative agreement to bring to the committee as a whole, but it would be unusual if you couldn't get the people who know the most about the negotiations to agree to recommend it.
Dawn?
I was going to follow up and say, so are we leaning towards not having 4 committee members then? Because that's a large
Well-
representation? Are we looking to have maybe 1 and 1, and is there opportunity? Yeah. I don't know for others, but, did you say community members on the negotiating?
No,
No.
I guess I was.
Committee members.
Community and committee members.
Oh, it's okay.
Well,
I
Don,
think-
usually
I think
you
in
would have
something like this, we tend to
superintendent,
think, I
business
believe the committee
manager,
tends to think of
school
itself
committee members.
by community.
attorney.
Okay.
Do you understand? Go ahead.
But just, I don't mean to cut you off if you were, oh.
No.
Just, could you go over the units? A is teachers, B is,
Unit A are teachers, Unit B are teacher administrators, assistant principals, curriculum directors. Unit C are administrative assistants, and D are paraprofessionals.
thank you.
And usually, historically, you always start with the teachers because they're the biggest unit.
Well, Kevin and Cindy are mean, so we want to
They're
get... here. But, no, they're the biggest association, and their contract is the thickest, and language sometimes piggybacks off of 4 paras, for admin assistants, piggybacks off the teachers. And traditionally, yes, you start with A, and work out the language there.
And keep in mind, all of this comes back to the full committee. This is not stifling anyone's vote. It comes back to the full committee. And what John's saying is, once you have bargained in good faith, if you have 4 members, they have bargained in good faith, you already have 4 votes in the affirmative. And that's what he's talking about, because it's good faith bargaining. You already have 4 votes. You only need 2 more to ratify. So,
Mr. Chair?
yes,
And just the other thing, I believe it's permissible that the entire committee can meet prior and during an executive session to strategize.
Yeah.
oh, it most certainly is.
Yes, Fred.
It most certainly is. You can meet prior, you can meet, I mean, obviously, everything Fred's an executive session, because meeting out of executive session would leave you in a detrimental place,
Correct.
spilling the beans, so to speak. If we're gonna bargain, we're gonna bargain, so keep that in mind. What's your pleasure? I'll go with 2, 3, 4, what, speak up.
4.
I mean, it's a new concept. I know we've always had 4 in the past, sometimes too big. I've sat in this library till 11:30, 12 o'clock at night from 3 in the afternoon. Correct, Kevin?
We've never had an issue in the past, but that's not saying we couldn't have an issue now. If it was that much of a concern, you could do 1-1 or 1 at large even.
Do we have
Just do
2
4.
Hanson
Dawn, go
people, equal representation? If we only have 1 Hanson person, I would suggest 1 Whitman person.
Yes.
So I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Why,
I don't know.
Go ahead, Chris.
why does sorry, help me understand, why does the town matter?
Equal, I don't know. I guess that's what we just said, 2 and 2. I guess, okay, I guess we can have 2 and 1. Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, because I think one of the things we established, I think, at the last meeting was we all represent both towns. So,
Okay.
you know, I don't know. I'm just asking. I'm not being fresh. I'm literally asking, like, why are you thinking it has to be Hanson? I mean, ultimately, it's district-wide.
Well, Chair Hayes was saying 2 and 2.
Right.
I was going with that lead.
Right.
I don't pretend to know, you know, just a comment, like, we're gonna be getting to the rack, right? And I know having equal representation on that is pretty
That
important.
might be different.
Well, right, so I mean, if we're gonna have a way of doing things, I guess that's all I'm saying.
Well, I guess there's several ways to look at it. Let's say we started out with 1 and 1. And it wasn't working out, we can always add members. Dan, go ahead.
I say just stay with the 4, and towns don't matter except for probably the RAC, because we got 4 people from Whitman on the policy subcommittee, nobody from
Right.
Hanson, so it doesn't matter towns, because like, we're a committee. We represent the whole district at that. The regional agreement, yeah, you would want equal representation, because then you're really putting your towns, you're fighting for your town to make sure that it's equitable there, but all this other stuff, it's a region, it's not an individual town type thing, so I say go with the 4 that we've always had. And like Fred was saying, you could always, if we come up to something when you're in those subcommittees, you just don't make anything until you go back to the committee in an executive session and get their input, and then you can go back and have the, back in the fellow committee members if you're stuck on something. And we've done that in the past.
Chris? Yep, thanks, Dan.
I think that's, I'm thinking, if I'm understanding what John was, the issue he was bringing up, I think that just happened with me where I had why wouldn't we want equal representation? And Dan goes, well, a policy subcommittee doesn't have, and I'm like, oh, yeah, right. So it's like, when you have 4 members in a subcommittee that's negotiated, sometimes when those members come back to the full committee and get a different perspective, maybe they'd go like, well, wait a minute, I'm not so sure about that. And I think that's where the jeopardy is, of having 4 members on the committee that are already voting. So that's just my 2 cents,
Chris?
I like the concept of 3. I think maybe that's a happy medium where we're not at 4. I think 3 is more than sufficient, especially if they're representing the will of the committee.
Mike?
I think 3 works.
Go ahead, Kev.
Mr. Hayes, can I weigh in? So if my memory corrects me, the history and so forth, sometimes it gets hazy after a while, especially tonight. I want to say at various points in sessions, had as many as 6 at the table. And in our most recent section, I think that was whittled down to 2 after some back and forth. So I would say you've had as many as 6, 5, and I think most recently in our last session, it was 2 for the unit for our school committee. I don't know if that helps there.
I remember when we were sitting right in here, and we whittled it down to 2 that would go there, down to the other wing, remember?
Yeah, no, at one point, the school committee was dropping like flies. Yeah.
Well, that's because we started out with the 4 or 5 members, and it took so long that some people had to step away because of conflicts.
Go ahead, Fred.
I don't really think it matters if we have 2, 3, or 4. I mean, if we have 4, that's fine, as long as we go into it cognizant and we, let the union know that we will not empower ourselves to make any commitments without bringing it to the, an executive session with the full committee. And then the only difference is they wouldn't be able to bring it back to their committee until we've met, that's all. But if we, adhere to that guideline, I would think 4 people could be fine.
Kevin?
If I could just interject, so one of the things that we've done in the past is we establish our ground rules, is that the subcommittee for the association as well as the school committee, you would have the ability to enter into that tentative agreement, right? So you can make that tentative agreement. So we can move on and make progress with the idea that you have to go back to your folks and we have to go back to ours for full ratification. But you wouldn't have to bring in the full school committee to make a tentative agreement to move us forward. That's
I
my
understand. I
understanding.
mean, it's both sides of that.
Yeah,
It's good faith bargaining. I mean, you're gonna come forward with your group.
Legal, that would be perfect.
I didn't.
What, Fred?
I didn't hear him.
No, it's the ground rule, I think that was Kevin that was speaking.
Yes.
Yes.
As long as, it doesn't supersede mass law and it's legal for us to do it that way, and we can establish that type of a ground rule, that would be perfect.
We'll check
Okay,
with
so
council,
what's your
but yeah.
pleasure? 2, 3, or 4?
3.
3.
Consensus. Mr. Cullen?
Go with 3.
3.
3.
3.
3, sure.
3.
3.
3 is fine. Yeah.
3.
3.
Well, I think, no. 3's good.
Fred?
Can have your opinion.
Fred? 3.
Obviously gonna say 3.
All right, 3.
Unanimous, wonderful.
Fine.
Thank you all.
So-
Okay,
Who's the
now
third
the
person?
problem's gonna be, which 3?
I'll do it.
I want in.
The-
Who else, anybody? I've got Dan, Fred, and Mike Jones.
I'll do it. For the 3rd?
No,
No,
I've got
you have 3.
Dan, Fred, Mike,
Oh,
Joe.
that's fine, sure.
That's 3. Right? Dan, Fred, Mike,
Oh,
that's 3.
I'm sorry. It's getting late.
It's after 9:30, the corona's
I thought
out.
you were looking for a 3rd.
And just letting you know that those 3 don't have to do all 4.
Yeah.
Oh,
So other members can have an opportunity to do B, C, and D.
That's what I thought
We've
you
done
were
in the past.
Okay.
We'll start out.
So that it minimizes the amount of time that certain members, these could be long meetings with A, B, C, and D, and could drag on, we hope not, past the 30th. So it doesn't have to be the same group. Once A maybe is ratified, we go with a secondary subcommittee for B,
Yeah.
C, and D.
We can juggle that around. That's not
So,
an-
just so that people aren't overtaxed with meeting time.
Mr. Jones, you want to chair it?
Sure.
Okay. Next up, establish a regional agreement subcommittee, RAC.
well,
Mr. Scriven.
right, so we've been talking about getting a regional agreement committee together for a while now, and I do think it's very important. It's throwing it out there, are we going to establish new members, whittle it down, do we like what worked? I mean, do we like what we had? I guess that's my question to the committee.
How many
How
members?
best to proceed.
Put your hand up.
Whether disbanded,
What's that?
was the other committee ever officially disbanded?
No,
Well,
that I know of.
so just a point of order, right, Bob? So I think, isn't it, my understanding was that any subcommittee only went until we reorganized and then they had to be reappointed.
That's
Yes?
correct.
Or did they continue in perpetuity forever?
That's correct.
Reorganization.
So when we did our reorganization in May,
Yeah.
I don't think we have addressed this since then. So I'm not sure it continues forever, right? I think, and someone else weigh in.
You're correct.
Okay.
We-
So
we
every
reorg-
May it starts again.
We redo committees every year.
Right.
Chris, how many members did you have?
Oh, help me, Chris. How many do we have?
16?
Dozen.
Dozen, I'd say.
It was a number of folks.
Michelle, can you tell me that?
We'd have to look at minutes, Bob, because there were quite a few.
Yeah.
So maybe my recommendation here is that we establish a school committee, regional agreement committee, to set out who we want from the 2 communities, and then bring that back.
Correct.
Because that committee has been disbanded, and both communities, those members maybe don't want to be part of that and have different roles within the community.
Okay, the regional agreement committee. How about if we have 4 school committee members, 2 and 2? I know there's concerns town-wise that it's equally represented.
So,
What's your thoughts?
so my only concern is I feel like we're falling into the same trap of getting unwieldy. Because as soon as we do 2 and 2 school committee members, then I think it's automatically we're getting to 2 and 2 select people, and next thing you know, we're already up to like 12. So I don't know. Part of me says, I think it should be thinner.
One and
I would
one?
recommend a 1-and-1, and then I think there has to be some conversation, again, back to this, what is the committee looking to accomplish? The subcommittee is charged with what the committee wants to accomplish, not just what they think they should be doing, so I think 2 members should handle
the
it.
committee itself, the 10 of us need to come up with what we would like to see accomplished, and then have a subcommittee and send them with marching orders to try and get some of that accomplished. In 18, if my memory serves me right, in 18, I think we had an agreement, and there was a couple of pieces. Whitman didn't like one part of, it was something to do with removing yourself from the region, and that's why they didn't vote it, if my
Yeah.
memory serves me
Essentially,
correct.
yeah.
That sound right? Yep.
Dissolving.
Withdrawal language.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, withdrawal language. And Hanson had voted it,
Yes.
They rescinded.
and then they took it back to, because Whitman didn't vote it, so they took their vote back, and I think that's how it kind of ended. But we were pretty close to there,
In 18, you're saying? Yeah,
yeah, in 18.
yeah.
It-
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Fred.
Would
I'm
it be
sorry.
so crazy
What?
to take that agreement from that RAC committee from 17, 18, replace the apportionment language with the language that was voted at town meetings last summer, and perhaps have a conversation with the folks in Whitman as to what about the withdrawal language they didn't like, or in fact, was it, I believe they wanted to have something in there that gave them the right as the prior agreement to withdraw from K to 8. And I thought that there was something perhaps illegal about that, and that's why it wasn't in there at all.
I believe,
But if we can iron those things out, maybe we can just use that prior agreement that we already have.
well, would be my recommendation to the committee if that be it.
I know Chris has
Go
got.
ahead, Chris.
But I was just gonna offer to serve on the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee, and I was just gonna say that it was really good to have Chris on the committee as well. It was very challenging, and I felt like we, you know,
So be it.
well,
And then we can branch out from there and see who you're gonna take.
So my only comment real quick, because I think this is important, is I wish it was as easy as you just described, we'll take the template and we'll use it. I do think we're gonna need some lines of communication and dialogue. I mean, a lot has transpired, and I have not followed this at all, so this is, you know, I know Hanson at one point at least was talking about, or had established like a deregionalization feasibility piece. There was a lot of questions around the weighing of the committee and the membership, and I know there's clear regulatory guidance on how, but I think people may have some opinions on some of these pieces that we're gonna need to kind of work through. I don't think we could just take the, hey, let's turn back time. A lot happened from 18 to.
Oh, of
where we are
course.
now.
Of course, you're gonna have to go over it line by line. I mean, you're gonna have to almost start again, but you might as well take the 18 agreement, see if that can be a baseline, and then tweak it from there. And you might have to throw it out totally.
Yep.
But that's up to Fred?
Would it be worthwhile to either get an estimate from Mars or perhaps our attorney as to the cost of, you know, redoing the 18 agreement and addressing that? Because it may be a lot less expensive than it was back in 18, seeing that most things are done. And that way there, you know, it puts the legal lease, so to speak, in proper perspective.
Jeff?
Can we just get the subcommittee together and then
Yeah.
move forward from there?
Yeah, we're talking about the
Because I
regional.
just want the
Talk to
two
the
members and
selectmen and see what
then
they
we can
wanna
go
do.
from there.
So we've got them.
It's 10:12.
1, 2.
Yeah, I'll be happy.
Everybody okay with that?
I get that, it's Thursday.
So it's everything, keep in mind, everything that goes before a subcommittee has to come to school
back.
committee for a full
So
vote.
we have a subcommittee? Is that?
Yeah, Chris
Awesome.
and Chris.
So what is the committee's pleasure? Do you want us to try and come up with something and present it, or do you want to put this on an agenda and you'll tell us? What's your pleasure?
Put it on the next agenda.
Okay, great,
Exactly.
fantastic.
All right. We're gonna have to go into executive session to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements to review executive session meeting minutes, and I declare it has been signed. After we come out of executive session, I will be taking a motion to adjourn. There will be no votes taken. We need a roll call to go into executive session. Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Boyce?
Yes.
Mr. Cullen?
Yes.
Mr. Small?
Yes.
Mr. Scriven?
yes.
Ms. Spires?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes, yes.
Yes.
Mr. Sniffen? Yes. We're in executive session. Thank you.